was the same thing. He'd press the button and roll the dice, hoping for a different result. The system's results were just as bad as always. His name was Hanjue. He had no spirit root at all. His innate fate was destined loner, a trait that guaranteed he'd have no friends, family, or lover, but added 100 years to his life. It was a garbage roll. He completely lost it. He screamed at the screen, furious at the idea of being destined to be alone for his entire life. He grabbed his shirt in frustration. It had been 11 whole years of this. He pleaded with the system, begging it to take pity on him and just give him something good for once. His name is Han Jue. He originally came from 21st century Earth, where he was diagnosed with late-stage cancer at just 21. Not wanting to suffer through painful treatments, he decided to just stay home and wait for the end. To distract himself from the pain, he played an old immortal cultivation game. He didn't expect to just pass away while playing. When he opened his eyes again, he was in a completely different world, one that looked like ancient times. He had been reborn inside an immortal cultivation sect, the Jade Pure Sect. In this life, his parents were slaves to an outer sect elder named Elder Iron. The elder forbade his slaves from cultivating. When Han Jue was 6, his parents fled, leaving him behind. Elder Iron didn't seem to care much, but he made the boy take over his parents' duties. And just like that, he turned 11. Though he had a system, it only let him re-roll his stats once a day. He had already been rolling for nearly 10 years, so waiting a little longer didn't matter. He refused to believe he wouldn't get a great roll eventually. He was determined to get a perfect spirit root and innate fate before he even thought about cultivating. Many days passed. Han Jue's routine was always the same. He'd start with his morning stretches. Then it was time for the most important part of his day. He brought up the system, ready to test his luck once again. The dice rolled, and the result was just as terrible as always. His spirit root was still complete garbage. The disappointment hit him like a physical blow. He was so frustrated, he started crying. But he wasn't done yet. He decided to forget the spirit root for now and just roll for his innate fate. He pressed the button. This time, something was different. The system displayed the results, and they were unbelievable. He had rolled 4 top-class innate fates at once. Unparalleled, destined sword fanatic, peak movement technique, and descendant of the immortal emperor. He stared at the screen, completely stunned. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The shock quickly turned into pure joy. After 11 years of waiting, he had finally hit the jackpot. He collapsed onto the grass, grinning from ear to ear. All that patience had finally paid off. His focus narrowed. With the 4 innate fates secured, only one thing was left: his spirit root. He steeled himself, ready to keep rolling for decades if that's what it took. He thought about his 2 lives and refused to end up like the other slaves, stuck here forever. He made a promise to himself. One day, the whole world would know the name Han Jue, but that day felt very far away. For now, he was just a kid in a poor, dusty village. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air, shouting for everyone to come out. 2 immortals from the main sect were here. Han Jue was confused. Cultivators from the main sect never came to a place like this. Everyone gathered to look up at the 2 figures. They looked powerful, like real immortals. The other kids were completely amazed, wishing they could be that strong one day. But Han Jue wasn't jealous. He just scoffed. He knew that once he finally rolled a top-class spirit root, he'd be way stronger than either of them. One of the cultivators addressed the crowd. He announced that they would be taking over the herb garden and warned everyone to stay away. Han Jue's eyes went wide. He wondered what happened to Elder Iron, the man who used to be in charge. One of the cultivators explained what was going on. Turns out, the Jade Pure Sect had been infiltrated by enemies, and Elder Iron had to leave to deal with it. She told everyone not to worry. They were here to protect the garden. Han Jue let out an of relief. This was actually good news. He needed Elder Iron's protection to keep rolling for that supreme cultivation potential. The world was dangerous, and he had to be strong enough to protect himself before he did anything else. So his routine continued. The next day, he prayed for a top-tier potential and got nothing. The third day was the same. A full year went by, and his luck was still terrible. His frustration was building. 2 years passed. After all that time, he still hadn't rolled a single high-grade cultivation potential. He was starting to lose hope, wondering when he'd ever be able to actually start cultivating. He even thought about just settling for a middle-grade potential, but he quickly shut that down. It would be a total waste. He needed a top-tier one to live a long life. Suddenly, a voice shouted that Elder Iron was back. After 2 years, he had finally returned. Elder Iron stood before the crowd, looking powerful. He told everyone they had done a good job in his absence, and that he appreciated their hard work. The crowd was ecstatic. They told him it was the least they could do. It was an honor to share his burden. Han Jue just rolled his eyes. He thought everyone sucking up to the elder was pathetic. But then, a man pointed directly at him and a few others, including a boy named Zhang Ge. He announced that the master had summoned them. The other servants started whispering among themselves. They wondered why the master would call for those specific 4, guessing he might be putting them in charge of the garden. Elder Iron ordered the group to stretch out their hands. He was going to examine their cultivation potential. Han Jue was stunned. Servants were forbidden from cultivating, so why the sudden change of heart? Something felt wrong. That's when Han Jue saw it. Blood on the elder's clothes. He was definitely injured. Elder Iron's eyes seemed to glow as he repeated the command. Terrified, Han Jue slowly held out his hand. Han Jue's mind was racing. He was afraid the elder planned to turn them into pills to heal his injuries. The first servant was checked and dismissed for having no potential. But then the elder examined the next boy and smiled. He found cultivation potential and offered to take him as his disciple. The boy, Zhang, couldn't believe his luck and immediately accepted. The crowd started murmuring, calling him a lucky guy. They knew he was about to become a cultivator, leaving them all behind. But Han Jue saw it differently. He thought they were all idiots. He was sure that once Zhang left, he would never be seen again. This whole situation was terrifying, and it made him realize he had to get strong on his own, and fast. Another 3 years passed. Han Jue kept at it, day after day. And then, finally, he burst out laughing. He had done it. The system confirmed it. He had rolled the spiritual physique of the 6 paths, a top-tier potential, with mastery over 6 different elements. All his years of hardship had finally paid off. He was ready to start cultivating. But his excitement faded when he remembered Elder Iron. He was sure the old man had done something to Zhang, who had disappeared without a trace. If the elder found him cultivating, he'd be next. Just then, the system offered a solution. It could create a barrier to hide him from everyone. A barrier was the perfect solution. A confident smile spread across his face. With this, he had nothing to worry about. With everything settled, Han Jue declared that this was the day he would officially begin his path. He commanded the system to start. The moment he began, a massive wave of spiritual energy exploded from him. The power was incredible. The system laid out his entire life story. It confirmed he was abandoned by his parents, had an incredible talent for the sword, and could sense 6 mysterious powers. Now that he'd awakened the immortal emperor's inheritance, he had to choose his main cultivation path. He thought about it for a second. His special technique involved all 6 elements, so just picking one seemed like a waste. That's why he made his choice. He would focus on being a swordsman. The moment he started, he could feel it. A warm energy filled his entire body. This was cultivation. The system warned him that once he started down this road, there was no going back. He pulled up his status screen. It listed all his incredible abilities, from his top-notch swordsmanship to his mastery over every element. But then he noticed something new, an extra tab for relationships. He had no idea what that was for. He opened it and saw Elder Iron's name. The system said the elder hated him and would definitely try to hurt him if he found out about his talent. Han Jue was furious for a moment, but then he calmed down. He figured the old man's grudge was because of his parents. Since the elder hadn't been around for years, it didn't really matter. With that settled, he got serious. He decided he would cultivate until he reached the 7th stage of the Qi refinement realm. Once he was that strong, he'd leave this place for good, and Elder Iron wouldn't be able to do a thing about it. As he began, orbs of light appeared around him, different types of Qi. He noticed only 4 of the 6 elements were present in the garden. Just then, the system gave him a choice. He could be a famous genius, or he could hide his power and cultivate in secret. The choice was obvious. The ability to hide his true power was exactly what he needed. Without hesitation, he told the system he would take the second option. He would cultivate in secret. 2 years passed. Han Jue spent all that time cultivating in secret, hiding among the other servants. He wasn't just cultivating for himself. He was using his elemental powers to make the medical herbs grow faster and stronger. And it worked. The herbs were thriving. He had finally cultivated all 4 types of Qi to the 7th stage of the Qi refinement realm. His goal was complete, so he decided to call it a day. On his way back, he ran into some of the older servants. They greeted him warmly, and he told them the harvest had been good. Turns out, his immortal beauty attribute was causing problems. The women in the sect couldn't stop staring at him. He was starting to think being this handsome was more trouble than it was worth. That's when someone called his name. It was a cultivator named Xing. She told him to follow her into the forest, saying she wanted to talk to him alone. Han Jue was confused, but he agreed. He had no idea what she wanted, but he followed her into the woods. He was instantly suspicious. This woman, Xing Hongshuan, never talked to servants. To figure out what she wanted, he secretly checked his system. The result was shocking. It said she had a 2-star favorable impression and was very interested in him. He couldn't understand it. They had never even met. His mind started racing. He figured it had to be his immortal beauty attribute. He worried she wanted to use for her own cultivation. But then she spoke, telling him not to be nervous. She just wanted to ask him one thing. Was he really willing to be a servant in the garden forever? Of course he didn't want to be a slave, but he was stuck there, and Elder Iron was a problem. That's when she made her offer. She told him to do her a favor, and in return, she would help him cultivate and get rid of his mortal status for good. Han Jue asked what the favor was. She laid out the plan. He had to help her get Elder Iron's alchemy recipe. If he did, she would take him with her when she left the sect and headed to the fiendish cult. She even added that if he had talent, they could become a Dao couple. He was completely floored. The fiendish cult? This woman wasn't just some rogue cultivator. She was part of a dangerous enemy sect. The situation had just gotten 1,000 times worse. His mind reeled. The fiendish cult was an enemy of his sect. This wasn't just a simple request anymore. This was a trap. He was completely trapped. If he helped her, the Jade Pure sect would hunt him for the rest of his life. But if he refused, she'd kill him right here to silence him. They were deep in the forest, too far for anyone to hear him scream. He knew they were both at the same cultivation level, but he had no magic or weapons. Fighting was not an option. He tried to talk his way out of it, pretending he didn't know where the recipe was. He reminded her about the guard at Elder Iron's attic and lied, saying he had no cultivation at all. She wasn't buying it. She told him she already knew the recipe was in the attic and that Elder Iron wouldn't be back for years. As for the guard, she said she'd take care of him herself. To make things easier, She offered him a small black pill. She claimed it was a gift to help him, but Han Jue knew better. That thing was definitely poison. Before he could refuse, she forced the pill into his mouth. She told him to be a good boy and promised that once the job was done, she'd make him her husband. He had no choice but to swallow. He managed to choke out a thank you, pretending to be grateful, but inside, he was furious. The second she was gone, he told the system to get that pill out of his body. He immediately coughed up the black poison. He swore he'd make Xing Hongxuan pay for this, but for now, he had to figure out his next move. People from the fiendish cult were ruthless. Even if he helped her, she'd probably just kill him afterward to keep him quiet. That's when a system mission popped up, giving him two choices. He could steal the recipe and become an enemy of his own sect, or he could defy Xing Hongxuan and get a powerful new sword technique as a reward. The choice was easy. He could actually get rewarded for not helping her. That settled it. From that moment on, Xing Hongxuan was his enemy. Later, Xing Hongxuan appeared in his room to give him the plan. She told him the recipe was in the study and that she would lead the guard away. All he had to do was sneak in and find it. Han Jue just nodded, pretending to agree. She warned him that the attic had a protective array. If he set it off, Elder Iron would be alerted instantly. He didn't have much time. The target was Elder Iron's attic, a tall building standing alone in the night. When Han Jue got there, he saw what she meant by leading the guard away. She had killed him without a second thought. He stared at the body, shocked. This woman was more brutal than he could have imagined. The guards were in chaos, yelling as they chased after Xing Hongxuan. From the shadows, Han Jue saw that her distraction had worked perfectly. Since the coast was clear, he decided to play along for a little while. He slipped inside the building. The moment he got inside, he realized the problem. The warehouse was massive, and he had no idea where to even start looking. He couldn't help but feel annoyed at how rich Elder Iron was, while the servants starved. Suddenly, Xing Hongxuan appeared in the room, a strange, ghostly figure floating beside her. She immediately demanded to know if he'd found the alchemy recipe yet. Han Jue quickly explained that he hadn't found it yet, trying to sound convincing. He swore his loyalty to her, but she wasn't buying it and accused him of slacking off. She told him to stop the nonsense, saying she saw everything. With a cold look, she reminded him she'd already killed plenty of people tonight and wouldn't hesitate to add him to the list. Han Jue started to panic, but then his eyes landed on something. A container on a high shelf suddenly tipped over and started to fall. Both of them froze, staring at it. It shattered on the floor, and a scroll rolled out. Unbelievably, it was the alchemy recipe. They had found it. It looked like there had been a serious fight. The room was destroyed, but there on the floor was the alchemy recipe. Xing Hongxuan had gotten what she wanted, but she looked completely exhausted from the effort. Han Jue's heart dropped. He realized with absolute certainty that the moment she secured that recipe, she would kill him to tie up loose ends. He was completely screwed, and he knew he had to do something fast. But instead of turning on him, she suddenly wrapped him in a huge hug. She called him her lucky charm, thanking him for everything. Han Jue was just completely confused by the sudden affection. She was acting all sweet, but Han Jue wasn't buying it for a second. His mind was racing, knowing the recipe was now in her hands. He noticed her breathing was unstable. She must have used a lot of energy. This was his chance, and he had to decide if he should risk a sneak attack. He made his choice. As she focused on the scroll, trying to figure out how to open it, Han Jue crept up right behind her. With a determined look, he raised his hand, ready to strike her down. He didn't hesitate. The strike landed hard, sending her flying across the room. She hit the ground with a thud, and the precious alchemy scroll tumbled from her hands. But before Han Jue could grab it, a figure appeared out of thin air. It was an old man with a powerful presence, and he looked absolutely furious as he picked up the recipe. He angrily demanded to know who would dare to steal from him. Xing Hongxuan looked up from the floor, her face a mask of pure shock. She couldn't believe her eyes. It was Elder Iron, and she had no idea he was even back. Turns out, Elder Iron had been back for a long time, just waiting for them to show up. He explained that he'd been suspicious for years, since they were the only two disciples to ever accept his mission. With his trap sprung, he called her a fiendish cultivator and unleashed a powerful attack. Xing Hongxuan knew she'd fallen right into his trap. In her current state, she stood no chance against him. With the recipe still in her hands, her only option was to escape. As Elder Iron yelled for her to stop, she made a run for it. As she vanished, Elder Iron muttered that she was lucky to have such a good escape technique. Just then, another elder appeared in the ruined room. This was Han Jue's cue. He immediately started his act, pretending to be injured and claiming he tried to hold the woman off. But the new elder, Elder Irun, wasn't buying it, asking if they weren't accomplices. Elder Irun looked at him sternly and demanded to know exactly what happened. So Han Jue began to spin his tale, carefully explaining everything from his point of view. After hearing the story, Elder Irun just scoffed, telling Han Jue he was a fool for believing the woman actually wanted him as a husband. Han Jue put on an embarrassed face, but inside, he was sighing with relief. He had successfully dodged all the blame. The elder dismissed him, and Han Jue didn't hesitate for a second, quickly running off. He was so relieved. The system then confirmed he made the right choice. A message popped up up, stating that because he didn't help Xing Hongshuan steal the recipe, he had successfully obtained a new life-saving technique, the unparalleled Finger Divine Sword. 2 years passed in a flash. During that time, Han Jue quietly trained and mastered his new skills. He found a pretty good use for his powerful new ability, chopping wood. He figured showing it off once in a while for chores was fine, but this would be the last time. He knew the herb garden couldn't help his cultivation anymore, and it was time to leave. In just 2 years, Han Jue had pushed 4 of his spirit roots to the 9th level, but he'd hit a wall. The herb garden lacked the specific energy he needed to advance any further. He knew he couldn't stay there forever, stuck and unable to grow. Meanwhile, others were gossiping about Elder Iron, wondering if the old man's time was finally running out. Han Jue thought about Elder Iron, who was stuck at the 7th level and couldn't get any stronger. He realized that not everyone could break through so easily. This was the huge difference that amazing talent made. He knew that the right environment was important for everyone, including himself. With his mind made up, he decided to leave this place to get stronger and live longer. He took one last look around, saying goodbye to the home he'd known for 20 years. A new life was finally starting. As he looked at the grand buildings of the Jade Pure sect, he had an idea. He remembered that the herb garden was technically part of the sect, but a slave like him was never really counted as a member. This gave him the perfect plan. He decided he would just join the sect for real and cultivate there. As long as he didn't run into Elder Iron, his true identity would be completely safe. He was stopped almost immediately by 2 guards who demanded to see his sect pass. Without missing a beat, Han Jue calmly introduced himself as a rogue cultivator. He then revealed he was at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm and asked if there was any way he could join the Jade Pure sect. The guards were completely stunned. A rogue cultivator at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm was almost unheard of. Just as one of them was about to go report it, a voice cut through the air. A senior member of the sect had arrived, and he was clearly interested in what Han Jue had to say. The man introduced himself as Yang Luo, an outer sect warden. He was polite but cautious, explaining that they had to be careful about enemy cultivators trying to sneak into the sect. He then asked Han Jue for permission to do a quick check. Yang Luo asked him to demonstrate his spiritual energy. Without any hesitation, Han Jue agreed. He raised his hand, channeling his power for the warden to see. A beam of pure energy shot from his fingertip. It sliced through the air and slammed into a nearby cliff, blasting away a huge chunk of rock. This was clearly not a normal technique. The guards and even Yang Luo were left speechless. The warden couldn't believe the power coming from someone at the 9th level. He could tell the energy was pure, with no trace of evil, so he gave his approval. With that, Yang Luo told Han Jue to follow him to register, officially making him an outer sect disciple. Han Jue politely thanked the warden. Now that he was officially in, his mind was already on the next step. He asked Yang Luo how many disciples were in the outer sect, and more importantly, what it took to get into the inner sect. Yang Luo explained there were more than 2,000 disciples in the outer sect. To get into the inner sect, you had to reach the Foundation Establishment realm. He also mentioned a competition held every 3 years, where the top 3 winners get a special pill to help them break through. When Han Jue asked about the inner sect, the warden admitted he didn't know much, since it was located in a completely different small world. He said that the outer sect was completely separate, with no idea what went on inside the inner sect. Han Jue was amazed by how grand the sect was. Yang Luo just smiled proudly, confirming that the Jade Pure sect was the most established and respected sect in the entire Great Yan. Han Jue then asked if the sect had any special places to cultivate lightning and fire energy. Yang Luo explained that the outer sect didn't, but the inner sect probably did. The warden's eyes lit up a little, as he mentioned that having lightning potential was extremely rare, and the sect would often make exceptions and give special treatment to anyone who had it. That was the opening Han Jue was waiting for. He immediately asked Yang Luo to nominate him, promising that if he made it into the inner sect, he would never forget the favor. Seeing a chance to bring in a rare talent, Yang Luo didn't hesitate and agreed to speak to the Elder Hall on his behalf. True to his word, Yang Luo went straight to the Elder Hall. He announced that a rogue cultivator at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm wanted to join the sect. Inside, an elder sat at his desk, busy with his work. Without even looking up, he simply gave the standard order to have the newcomer go through the spiritual Qi assessment. As Yang Luo spoke with the elder, Han Jue overheard the word assessment, and his heart sank. He realized they would discover all 5 of his spiritual potentials, which would bring him way too much unwanted attention. Wanting to keep a low profile, he quickly decided to suppress most of his power and only show a little bit. Yang Luo presented Han Jue to the elder, explaining that he had rare thunder potential and wished to join the inner sect. The elder, now interested, asked for a demonstration. So, Han Jue let out his energy, revealing not just lightning, but also fire and wind cultivation potentials. Both men stared in complete shock. 3 types of potential was almost unheard of. His display was more than enough. Han Jue was given a bottle of pills, a sect badge, a storage bag, spirit stones, and a new set of robes. They told him they would report his talent to the Great Elder, and once he returned, they would bring him into the inner sect. For now, all he had to do was rest and wait for the news. But as soon as he was alone, Han Jue sighed with regret. His plan had worked a little too well. He couldn't help but worry that he had already already attracted far too much attention, and he hoped it wouldn't interfere with his quiet cultivation. He was thrilled with his new accommodations. He could feel a strong presence of fire, spiritual chi in the air, which was perfect for his training. His plan was simple. While waiting for the Great Elder to return, he would focus everything on getting his fire cultivation to the 9th level. He settled in and began thinking about how beautiful cultivation was. For most people, it was a slow process focused on just one type of spirit root, but for him, having 6 different attributes meant he had to put in way more effort. Thankfully, his supreme potential made it possible, and he never felt tired. With every bit of progress, he could feel his life extending, which was the whole reason he'd spent all those years rolling for the perfect stats to live forever. He thought back to his previous life. He had destroyed his body by staying up all night and got cancer when he was young. It was a hard lesson on the value of life, and he knew he wouldn't get a third chance. So this time, he didn't care about fame, money, or anything else. All that mattered was living a long, long life. Time flew by in a blur. Half a year later, Yang Luo appeared at his door. He apologized for the long wait, explaining that the Great Elder had finally returned to the sect. But then, Yang Luo's eyes widened in disbelief. He asked if Han Jue had seriously just stayed in his room cultivating for 6 straight months. He could feel it too. Han Jue's aura was way stronger than before. Han Jue snapped out of his trance, surprised that so much time had passed. He'd been so focused that he hadn't even noticed. In that half year, he'd already reached his goal. His fire cultivation was now at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. When Han Jue was finally brought before the elders, he greeted them respectfully. The men were immediately impressed. They could sense his fire. Cultivation had grown tremendously, and they praised him for cultivating so diligently for half a year without leaving his room. With his talent, they believed he could become one of the sect's few elite disciples. One of the elders explained that with his current temperament, he was already considered an inner sect disciple. To make it official, he would need to find a master. He told Han Jue that there were 18 coaching elders, and because they were all fond of him, he could be chosen directly. If not, he could always earn a spot by winning the inner sect competition. Han Jue listened carefully and confirmed that he understood. With that settled, it was time to go. As they traveled, the elder decided to give him some advice. He explained that each of the missionary elders had their own style. Some loved to stand out and be famous, while others preferred to cultivate quietly and keep a low profile. Then there were those who were always going out on missions. The elder then asked Han Jue directly what kind of training style he preferred. Han Jue didn't hesitate. He explained that he wanted to be a low-profile cultivator, as he really disliked crowds and being the center of attention. Hearing this, a wide, knowing grin spread across the elder's face. He told Han Jue that he had the perfect place in mind. The Jade Serene Peak, he said, would suit him perfectly. Han Jue was a bit confused by the suggestion, but followed along. As they flew on the back of a massive crane, Han Jue looked down at the world below. He couldn't help but be amazed by the sheer size of everything. It was far bigger than anything he could have imagined. The elder proudly announced that they were now looking at the inner sect of the Jade Pure Sect. Han Jue stared, completely stunned by the sight of the towering, icy mountain peaks that stretched as far as he could see. As other cultivators flew past them on swords, the elder noticed Han Jue watching. He told him not to be too impressed, promising that he'd be able to do the same thing soon enough. He then pointed to a massive complex of buildings down below. This, he explained, was the heart of the inner sect. It was the hub where disciples could take on missions, collect their pay, or trade with each other. Han Jue was stunned, admitting he had seriously underestimated how big the sect was. He accidentally mentioned something about a wuxia drama, which just left the elder completely confused. Shaking his head, the elder simply warned him to be careful, because a fall from this height would be deadly. When they finally arrived at the Jade Serene Peak, Han Jue couldn't hide his disappointment. He noted that it was the shortest peak of them all, and it looked completely deserted. The elder just nodded, confirming that this peak had the fewest disciples. The elder explained that the master of the peak, a woman named Xian Xuan, preferred to train in total silence. Because of this, all her disciples were basically loners who kept to themselves. He gave Han Jue a chance to back out, but this was the best news he could have heard. Han Jue was internally celebrating, realizing this was the perfect place to get stronger without anyone bothering him. Seeing his reaction, the elder was impressed. He thought to himself that this kid definitely had a bright future ahead of him. They entered a grand hall where 2 women were waiting. The elder introduced Han Jue, explaining he had 3 types of talent, including the very rare lightning element. He finished by saying that Han Jue's only wish was to train in peace and quiet, and then asked for their opinion. The woman with white hair, Xian Xuan, looked at Han Jue with a calm expression. She asked him directly if he was willing to join her peak and focus on nothing but his training. This was the moment that would decide everything. Han Jue agreed to her terms without hesitation. At that moment, the other woman, Chang Yuer, was completely smitten. She thought to herself that the Jade Serene Peak finally had a handsome disciple. Han Jue noticed a system window pop up, showing her favorability towards him was already at 2 stars. He was a little surprised that his good looks were really that powerful. But then, Han Jue made his own condition clear. He wanted to enter seclusion for 100 years and not leave his house unless he was given direct orders. Hearing this, Chang Yuer was crushed, realizing her hopes of getting to know him were dashed. The system immediately updated. Her favorability dropped to 1 star. Han Jue Hanjue just scoffed to himself, unimpressed by how quickly she changed her mind. Ignoring the awkwardness, the master, Xian Xuan, looked down at Hanjue. She wanted to see his ability for herself and told him to attack her with any spells he knew. Hanjue met her gaze, his expression serious. He accepted the challenge, promising to show her the best he had. Without wasting a moment, he gathered his spiritual energy. A brilliant golden light erupted from his hands as he unleashed a powerful attack. The blast of energy shot straight towards Xian Xuan. She stood perfectly still, taking the full force of the attack without even flinching. Seeing his power, Chang Yueter was immediately impressed again. The system confirmed it. Her favorability shot right back up to 2 stars. Another notification appeared for Xian Xuan. Her favorability was only at 1 star, but the system noted that she admired his dedicated heart. The woman asked if that was the only sword move he knew. When Hanjue said yes, she seemed satisfied. She told him his technique was good enough and that he could stay at the Jade Serene Peak. An elder wished him well before taking his leave. But Hanjue was more focused on the strange way his new master was looking at him. He had no idea what she was thinking. Suddenly, another woman appeared, yelling at him to kneel and acknowledge his master. Hanjue immediately dropped into a deep bow, shouting a formal greeting. His new master just sighed, saying a simple bow would have been fine. The master looked a little embarrassed, joking about whether he thought she was an empress. She turned to her other disciple, Yahello, and told her to take Hanjue to the inner sect to get registered and find him a place to live. Yahello happily agreed. As she led him away, she asked if he knew how to fly on a sword, but Hanjue admitted he hadn't learned yet. From behind, their master watched them go, and thinking to herself that he had a good, calm temperament. As they flew through the air, she introduced herself as Chang Yue'er. She told Hanjue he could just call her senior sister and to feel free to ask her for help with anything, since he was new. Hanjue, looking terrified, tried his best to be polite. He thanked her and said he wouldn't dare trouble her, but offered to lend a hand if she ever needed anything. His kind words made her smile. Turns out, she had been waiting 5 whole years to finally have a junior brother. She swore to herself that she would protect him. After all that waiting, she felt like her hard work had finally paid off. He was a little overwhelmed by his senior sister. He wondered if all the female disciples at Jade Serene Peak were this friendly. She led him to his new home, a cave abode right next to hers, so he could cultivate in peace. Hanjue thanked her politely. Once he was alone, he let out the inner sect was on a completely different level than anything he'd ever seen. For the first time since he started cultivating, he felt real pressure. He was finally starting to understand the huge gap between power levels. His new master was a cultivator in the nascent soul realm, a level so high it felt completely out of reach. He remembered what the first elder had told him. Even someone just 1 step away from the golden core realm was still only good enough to be an elder for the outer sect. He thought about the long road ahead. First came chi refinement, then foundation establishment. After that was the golden core, and finally, the nascent soul realm. Only the sect's founder had ever reached a realm higher than nascent soul. That meant his master, Fairy Sichuan, was the strongest person he knew. With a backer that powerful, his goal was no longer just survival. It was about becoming truly strong and living a long life. He decided it was time to stop thinking and start cultivating. He had to work hard and not disappoint his new master. Just then, the system gave him a choice. He could either seek fame and risk offending Fairy Sichuan, or keep a low profile, cultivate quietly, and earn her trust. He looked at the system's options. Seeking fame seemed like a terrible idea. His new master was different. He decided to play it safe and chose to cultivate quietly. 3 years passed in a flash. After 3 years of hard work, Hanjue decided it was time to learn the flying sword technique. He couldn't keep relying on his senior sister to get around. With his amazing talent for the sword, he was sure he could master it in no time. And he was right. He mastered it almost instantly. This was the true power of having supreme talent. Just then, his master appeared. She seemed surprised, mentioning that he'd actually stayed hidden away for 3 full years. Hanjue bowed respectfully and told her he had something important to ask. He explained that he'd already maxed out his wind and fire cultivation to the 9th level of the chi refinement realm. Now, he wanted to start on his thunder potential. His master asked if he really planned to cultivate all 3 elements. Hanjue's answer was even more shocking. He wanted to cultivate all 6. Her response was blunt. She told him that was impossible. Hanju's confidence shattered. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Hanjue asked her why. She explained that even mastering one type of spiritual energy was extremely hard. Trying to do more would just be a waste of time, and it would make his future heavenly tribulations much more dangerous. He knew she had a point, but she didn't know about his unique abilities. He knelt before her, promising that he understood the risks. He declared that with his determination, he believed he could succeed, and he was willing to spend all his time cultivating to prove it. Seeing his resolve, she gave in. She told him he could use the inner sect's teleportation formation to reach the Thunder Spiritual Pool. Hanjue thanked her and immediately set off. He arrived at the Thunder Spiritual Pool, and it was way bigger than he expected. The air was buzzing with intense thunder spiritual energy. energy, even from the teleportation platform. He decided to get a closer look. The energy was so pure. He realized that if he cultivated near the center, he could max out his thunder spiritual chi in no time. But he was surprised to see only one other person in the entire place. People with thunder potential must be really rare. Suddenly, a terrifying voice boomed out, warning him not to wander around. He was told to stick to the edge of the pool. If he disobeyed and got killed by the lightning, he'd have no one to blame but himself. The voice belonged to a young man with purple hair. He mocked Hanjue for screaming, asking if he'd never seen someone so handsome before. Hanjue, trying to save his skin, quickly agreed, flattering the guy by saying his good looks were blinding. Turns out, the handsome stud was actually a tree spirit. It accepted the compliment and told Hanjue to find a spot, just not too close to the center. Hanjue couldn't believe it. A tree spirit was a legendary treasure that could double a person's cultivation speed just by being near it. Hanjue was thrilled. He realized this was the perfect place to cultivate his thunder chi. He confidently announced he'd reached the 9th level in just 1 year. The purple-haired guy couldn't believe what he was hearing. He scoffed at the idea. He thought it was impossible for Hanjue, no matter how talented he was. There were just certain limits when it came to thunder cultivation, and he was sure this kid would fail. 1 year later, the purple-haired guy had to eat his words. He was completely stunned, admitting the kid was insane. Hanjue had actually done it. After maxing out all 6 types of spiritual energy, he was finally ready for foundation establishment. Hanju remembered his master's warning about a stronger tribulation, but his special technique had a way to handle it. As storm clouds gathered, the others looked up in horror. It was a thunder tribulation happening right here in the pool. The purple-haired guy explained that this was the worst possible place for a tribulation. The pool's energy would make the lightning twice as powerful. They realized it was too late to help. The tribulation cloud was already set, and Hanjue was trapped. A massive bolt of lightning crashed down from the sky, aimed right at him. The others watched in disbelief, but Hanjue wasn't scared. He planned to absorb the lightning and use its power for his own breakthrough. His technique allowed him to turn the heavenly thunder into pure spiritual energy, making him even stronger. Instead of being destroyed, he stood firm, pulling all of the raw energy directly into his body. The other cultivators were speechless. They had no idea what kind of technique he was using, but it worked. He had successfully advanced to the foundation establishment realm, and it had happened way too fast. 2 years passed. After using the thunder spiritual pool for a total of 3 years, Hanjue paid his fees and finally left. He walked through the sect, taking everything in after being away for so long. He checked his status and was shocked. In just 2 years, he'd already reached the 3rd level of foundation establishment, making him one of the best in the inner sect. His lifespan was now almost 200 years. The system gave him another choice, and he couldn't help but notice how much it rewarded him for staying quiet. That's when the cultivator from the pool approached him. He introduced himself as Mo Fuchu from the Heavenly Thunder Peak. He told Hanjue that his talent was being wasted and tried to convince him to join his peak instead. But Hanjue immediately turned him down. He explained that he'd already acknowledged Fairy Sichuan as his master for life, and he couldn't betray her. Mo Fuchu respected his decision, but said the offer would still Meanwhile, a group of cultivators was searching a mountain range, looking for someone. The elders had promised a huge reward for catching a traitor. Hiding in the grass below, a woman with red hair listened, trying not to be seen. Her name was Xing Hongshan. She'd just escaped a dangerous cult, but now she was a fugitive. She knew only one person would ever believe her story, Hanjue. But just then, a bird with glowing red eyes spotted her, hiding in the bushes. She was found. She tried to make a run for it, but her pursuers were right on her tail. They yelled that the sinner couldn't be spared. Miles away, Hanjue was getting a strange notification. The system was telling him everything that was happening to his old friend, Sheng Hongshuan. He hadn't seen her in over 10 years, but for some reason, her affection for him had just gone up. He was shocked. The system could actually track other people's activities. He had no idea just how many features it really had. After a moment, he decided not to worry about it. The system hadn't hurt him yet. He put it out of his mind and went right back to cultivating. Suddenly, a loud bell echoed through the peak. Before Hanjue could figure out what was happening, a woman he knew called out to him. She was thrilled, explaining that the bell was a summons from their master and they had to go together. That's when she noticed his power. She was stunned, realizing he'd already reached the foundation establishment realm. She couldn't even tell how strong he was. The woman, Chang Yue'er, felt like a failure for falling behind. The system immediately notified Hanjue that her feelings toward him had soured. She grabbed her sword and told him they had to go immediately, promising to explain on the way. But Hanjue had a bad feeling about all this. As they walked, she explained that the bell was a summons for every single disciple on Jade Serene Peak. It was the first time it had rung in years, which was why she'd never mentioned it before. Hanjue listened quietly. A summons for all disciples could only mean one thing: trouble. He really hoped this wouldn't turn into a huge problem. They arrived at a large hall, already filled with disciples. The air was thick with rumors. Everyone was talking about spies from the viridescent nether cult who had apparently snuck into their sect. When Hanjue walked in, the The conversation stopped. The other disciples were captivated by his appearance, wondering who this handsome senior brother was. Just then, a man stepped forward, guessing that he must be the master's newest disciple. The man introduced himself as Liu Sangxin, the chief disciple of Jade Serene Peak. He explained that since their master didn't like to manage daily affairs, he was the one in charge. He told Hanjue to come find him anytime he needed help with anything. After Hanjue took his seat, a woman's voice filled the hall. It was their master. She announced that the last 3 peaks were being sent to fight the viridescent nether cult. The sect was preparing for a full counterattack. Hanjue looked around at the other disciples. He was confused. No one seemed worried at all. He couldn't understand why they weren't scared about going to war. The master's voice continued, telling them to be careful. Liu Sangxin then spoke up, assuring her that their peak would do its part. He then announced something new, a special program to train the most outstanding geniuses from each peak, turning them into the sect's future trump cards. Liu Sangxin pushed up his glasses with a grin. As the chief disciple, he was sure the program was made just for him, but the master's voice named someone else, Hanjue. She pointed out his incredible progress, going from chi refinement to the 3rd level of foundation establishment in less than 2 years. She asked him to join the program. Liu Sangxin's face dropped in disbelief. The other disciples immediately started shouting. They couldn't believe it. They argued that Liu Sangxin was the obvious choice, questioning why a new disciple was being given such an honor. Hanjue stood up and immediately refused. He thanked the master for the offer, but said he only wanted to stay on the peak and cultivate quietly. He told her the opportunity should go to one of his senior brothers or sisters. He was instantly suspicious. Why was the master suddenly so interested in him? He worried that she might think he was a spy for the nether cult. To be safe, he knew he had to turn it down. The master asked one last time if he was sure. With that, she gave the spot to Liu Sangxin instead, telling him not to cause any trouble. Liu Sangxin was so happy he started crying, immediately accepting the command. But the master was still confused. She couldn't understand why Hanjue would turn down such a valuable opportunity. After the meeting, Liu Sangxin was overjoyed. He thanked Hanjue for giving him the chance, promising to help him with anything he needed in the future. A system notification popped up. Liu Sangxin's favorability had gone up. Hanjue just wished him the best. Just then, one of their senior sisters showed up. She playfully told Liu Sangxin she was taking Hanjue away and then dragged him off. She pointed out that he'd only been cultivating and hadn't done any sect missions. She offered to guide him through one, but Hanjue immediately asked if he could refuse. She tried to convince him, explaining that missions offered resources and points for pills. Hanjue told her he had enough spirit stones. He was scared of dying, so he wasn't interested. The woman was stunned, asking how a cultivator could possibly be afraid of death. Hanjue looked right at her and asked a simple question. If you're not afraid of death, why even bother cultivating? She froze. She had no answer. He actually made a good point. Watching from a distance, the master called him a coward, but she also realized he probably wasn't a spy. He was just a strange cultivator with a lot of resources and talent. Still, she decided she'd keep an eye on him. 10 years later, Hanjue was back at the Thunder Spiritual Pool. The spirit there was not impressed. It demanded to know why a supposed genius was still at the 3rd level of foundation establishment after all this time. Hanjue just gave a vague answer, saying cultivation is hard to explain. But the truth was, he was hiding his real power. He was only showing his thunder cultivation. In secret, he'd used a fortune in spirit stones to raise his other attributes, putting his true strength at the 5th level. He was focused on his plan to max out his thunder potential. That's when someone called out to him. A man named Mo Fucho had arrived, and he wasn't alone. Mo Fucho introduced his younger sister, Mo Ju. She looked at Hanjue and immediately questioned his strength. She said her brother had talked him up, expecting him to be at the 6th level by now, not the 3rd. Hanjue just said he was taking things slow. Then he gave them a warning. If they wanted to cultivate nearby, they should keep their distance. Mo Ju was clearly disappointed. She scoffed at the idea that Hanjue was a genius, calling his lack of progress a letdown. She then proudly announced that she was the real talent, having broken through 2 levels in 10 years. But just as she was showing off, she felt something. Her expression changed instantly. Suddenly, all the spiritual energy in the area started rushing towards one spot. It was being pulled in at an incredible rate. Mo Fuchu was in disbelief. The speed at which Hanjue was absorbing energy was faster than his own. His sister asked what technique he was using, but Mo Fucho could only guess it was his natural potential. That just left them with a bigger question. If he was this powerful, why hadn't he leveled up in 10 years? Mo Fucho finally understood. Hanjue had to be hiding his true power and was probably already as strong as him. The thought was humbling. At the same time, the system showed that both his and his sister's favorability towards Hanjue had increased. 8 years passed. Hanjue had finally done it. His thunder cultivation potential had reached the 9th level. With his training complete, it was time to head back to the inner sect. He hadn't collected his salary in a long time and wondered how much he'd saved up. The spirit of the pool noticed Hanjue's suppressed power. It offered him a special opportunity. Hanjue's first question was simple. Was it dangerous? The spirit told him that every opportunity comes with risks. That was all Hanjue needed to hear. He turned and walked away without another word. The spirit yelled for him to come back, but his mind was made up. He admitted to himself that he was tempted, but nothing with any risk was better than just collecting a steady salary. Back at the sect, Jue's appearance was already causing a stir. The woman, Miss Mo, leaned in with a sly grin. She told him this was a huge opportunity, something he absolutely couldn't afford to miss out on. She grabbed onto his arm, promising that if he succeeded, becoming rich and prosperous would be easy. Han Jue just looked panicked, wanting nothing to do with it. He quickly pushed her away, telling her to behave herself. He apologized and said he had to get back to his cultivation. Miss Mo was furious, yelling that he wasn't even listening to her about this amazing chance. But before she could finish, Han Jue was gone. He just vanished into thin air, leaving her completely stunned. A short distance away, Han Jue was already hiding, hoping she wouldn't come looking for him. As he hid, he overheard two other disciples talking. They were wondering who the handsome man who just ran past was. Sad that they didn't get a chance to ask which peak he was from. One of them said he was even more handsome than a disciple from last year's intersect competition. The moment Han Jue heard those words, his blood ran cold. The competition. He'd been cultivating for so long, he completely forgot about it. He knew his master was not going to be happy. He immediately rushed to his master's hall. After announcing himself, he went inside and bowed deeply, apologizing for missing the competition and explaining that he'd lost track of time. His master told him not to blame himself, saying there would be other opportunities. But then, her expression turned serious. She asked why his cultivation level still seemed to be stuck at the 3rd level of foundation establishment. She looked right at him and said she knew for a fact that it was far higher than that. Han Jue decided to finally come clean. He admitted to his master that he was already at the 9th level of the foundation establishment realm. He just hit it to keep a low profile. His master was completely shocked by how fast he'd advanced. Just then, the system recognized his dedication to quiet cultivation and rewarded him with a new movement technique manual. He tried to downplay his talent, saying he just enjoyed cultivating in peace. But as he spoke, he sensed someone else behind him. He turned, surprised that he hadn't noticed another person was in the room the whole time. Standing there was an old man with a serious, weathered face, staring right at him. Han Jue just froze with a weird, awkward smile, clearly not sure what to do. His master's voice cut through the silence, confused about why leaves were suddenly falling inside the hall. A moment later, two voices cried out in shock from different places, calling out each other's names. Elder Iron and Han Jue. The master looked between them, completely surprised. She asked if the two of them had met before, and it was clear from their faces that they had. She then formally introduced the old man to Han Jue. She explained that he was a new disciple of the Jade Serene Peak, and that Han Jue could just call him Junior Iron. Junior Iron was completely floored. He couldn't believe Han Jue was now an intersect disciple. He remembered that Han Jue didn't even have spiritual roots before. The old man thought about his own life, how it took him over 20 years to reach foundation establishment, while Han Jue had somehow skyrocketed to the 10th level. The sheer unfairness of it all left him speechless. The master noticed the dark look on his face and immediately warned him. She stated firmly that Han Jue was the genius of their peak, and that Junior Iron was not allowed to have any crooked thoughts about him. Hearing this, the old man simply sighed. He admitted he'd learned his lesson. This world was far more mysterious than he ever imagined. With the introductions over, his master got straight to business. Since Han Jue loved to cultivate so much, she decided to assign him a special mission, guarding the sect's 10,000 demon realm. The name alone sent a chill down Han Jue's spine. It sounded both awesome and incredibly dangerous. Junior Iron got excited, asking if he could go along to protect Han Jue, but the master immediately shut him down. She explained that the place was extremely dangerous, and that disciples were often killed when the beasts went wild. Han Jue couldn't believe how casually she mentioned something so serious. The master tried to soften the news, explaining that the spirit energy there was perfect for cultivation, and he'd be fine if he was careful. But Han Jue knew he wasn't being given a choice. He figured it was basically like being a zookeeper, and reluctantly accepted the mission. With that settled, she told him to go prepare. As Han Jue turned to leave, Junior Iron called out from behind him. He offered to help with the packing, a small gesture to show he was serious about starting over. Once they were alone, the master turned to Junior Iron with a serious look. She told him to forget whatever happened in the past and treat Han Jue as a brother from now on. She made it clear that any feud that wasn't deadly could and should be resolved. She assured him that Han Jue wasn't the type to scheme against him. Then, she revealed her true plan. In the future, Han Jue would become the core disciple of Jade Serene Peak. The words hit Junior Iron like a bolt of lightning, and his eyes shot wide open in disbelief. But as the shock wore off, it was replaced by a sense of acceptance. After everything he'd witnessed, Junior Iron finally admitted it to himself. That kid really did deserve it. So, Han Jue was sent to the 10,000 demon realm. A year and a half passed, just like that, with him guarding the place. He spent all his time cultivating, finally pushing his win potential to the 6th level of the foundation establishment realm. But with so many spiritual roots to work on, the process felt slow and incredibly boring. So, he decided to check his system for something new. He noticed the interpersonal relationships section had been updated. The system showed him that his friend Moju had been attacked, not just by a fiendish cultivator, but by disciples from her own sect. She was seriously hurt and had fallen from a cliff. After seeing that, he stretched and decided it was probably time to do his job. Even though the demon realm was great for cultivating, he was supposed to inspect it once in a while to make sure the monsters didn't cause any trouble. He stepped outside to start his patrol. Perched on a branch was a small white creature with big, glowing purple eyes. Han Jue looked at it and thought it seemed pretty harmless. Suddenly, he heard someone humming nearby. In a flash of purple light, a huge, shadowy beast appeared out of nowhere. The small, cute creature was gone. In its place was a massive, terrifying beast with glowing purple eyes looming right over him. The beast lunged forward, roaring with power. But Han Jue didn't flinch. A sword appeared in front of him, ready to meet the attack. The beast lunged, but Han Jue was already gone, landing safely on a nearby roof. He knew if he hadn't mastered his 7 illusionary steps technique, he would have been in real trouble. But something felt wrong. This was the first time a demon had gotten this close without triggering the protective spells. This wasn't some ordinary demon. Being able to slip past the forbidden spells meant it was a serious threat. Han Jue knew he couldn't hold back anymore. It was time to get serious. The 7 illusionary steps was an incredible movement technique. Each level allowed him to create an afterimage of himself. At its peak, he could produce 7 copies at once, making it impossible for an enemy to track his real body. He activated the technique, and suddenly, multiple versions of Han Jue appeared, surrounding the beast from every direction. The creature was fast, but now it had to figure out which one was real as they all closed in at once. The demon beast roared, its purple eyes glowing with rage. It wasn't intimidated by the copies. It was completely surrounded, trapped by the illusionary steps. But the real Han Jue was already in position, looking down on it from above. With the beast distracted, Han Jue prepared his next move. He raised his fingers, gathering his energy for the absolute finger divine sword technique. The beast looked up, its eyes wide with shock. In an instant, a web of golden light shot from his fingertips, trapping the beast completely. The creature let out one last roar as the attack closed in, leaving it with no way to escape. The golden light faded, and the beast was gone. Han Jue realized his 7 illusionary steps had a major weakness. Only his real body could do any damage. The copies were just a distraction. He knew he was lucky the creature was only fast and didn't have other attacks. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. A demon that could just walk past the sect's protective spells was a huge problem. Looking out over the peaks, it all started to click. That little creature was probably the cause of all the recent demon beast riots. He knew this was too big to handle alone. It was time to report this to the elders. Far from the demon realm, the sect elders were already discussing the strange events. One of them voiced a growing suspicion that the viridescent nether cult was behind all this. Another elder quickly agreed, telling him to stop being so hesitant, and stated as a fact. The conversation around the table grew more intense. One elder was certain the cult was trying to use the demon beasts to cause chaos. Another confirmed their fears, revealing the sect had already found more than 30 spies in their ranks. The idea of sending more disciples for support was brought up, but then a chilling thought was put on the table. What if there was a traitor among the higher-ups? Old immortal Taoist Thunder, the Thunder Peak Master, pointed out the suspicious timing of it all. The sect leader had just left, and suddenly the demon beast started going berserk. He declared that both issues needed to be thoroughly investigated. He then turned to a female elder, who had been silent the whole time, asking why she hadn't said anything. He pressed her, suggesting she knew more than she was letting on. He believed she knew about some secret genius nurturing program, and where the sect master had taken all the core disciples. The white-haired elder admitted she only knew bits and pieces. She looked at him seriously, saying that if there really was a traitor, he was the only one she could trust. They agreed to work together. With that settled, the order was given to send more disciples to the 10,000 demon realm for support, and the meeting was over. While the sect leaders dealt with politics and traitors, Han Jue was doing what he did best, cultivating. 2 full years passed in the blink of an eye. He remained deep in the demon realm, focused only on getting stronger. Han Jue had to admit, the forbidding spells the sect provided were perfect for cultivating in peace. After 2 years, all of his spiritual roots had reached the peak of the Foundation Establishment realm. He smirked to himself, realizing he didn't even need a breakthrough to handle enemies in the Golden Core realm. This place wasn't a dangerous mission anymore. It was his own personal training ground. But just as he was feeling safe, a voice suddenly broke the silence. Han Jue's blood ran cold. He spun around to find an old man standing right there. The old man told Han Jue not to panic, explaining that he was also a disciple from the same sect. He claimed he was just there to look after the 10,000 demon realm, just like him. But the old man saw right through him. He pointed out that Han Jue wasn't at the 3rd level at all, but at the 9th level of the Foundation Establishment. Han Jue was completely stunned. This stranger had seen through his true power instantly. The old man then casually asked if he came here on his own, or if his master sent him. Han Jue cautiously answered that his master, Fairy Si Xuan, had sent him. The old man's expression changed slightly, clearly interested by that name. The old man pushed further, asking if his master had given him a special mission. Han Jue stood his ground, questioning why he should share that with a stranger. The man seemed amused by his boldness, but then his tone turned serious. He warned Han Jue that he had no idea how much trouble he was actually in. He told Han Jue to come with him, offering to help settle things, since he was Fairy Shi Xuan's disciple. But at that exact moment, a system window popped up. It identified the old man as Li Dingzi, the sect master of the Jade Pure Sect, and more importantly, it said he adored Fairy Si Xuan. Han Jue's mind went into overdrive. This guy wasn't just some powerful elder. He was the sect master, and he'd lied about being a disciple, and the fact that he was crushing on his master made the whole situation situation 10 times worse. Li Dingzi then started to explain the danger Han Jue was in. He told him that all the demonic beasts in the area had gone completely berserk. He continued, saying that all these beasts were under the control of the tiger heart white dragon. Apparently, this dragon was known for holding grudges and getting provoked easily. The sect master then looked straight at Han Jue, convinced the dragon was summoning its army for revenge. He demanded to know what Han Jue had done to make it so angry, but Han Jue just stood there, completely silent. The sect master, Li Dingzi, tried to get his attention, asking if he was even listening. Inside his head, Han Jue was picturing the sect master with his master, Fairy Shi Xuan. The thought was so disgusting to him that he couldn't even respond. Li Dingzi's voice cut through his thoughts, demanding an answer to his question. Snapping back to reality, Han Jue finally spoke up. He explained that the whole incident with the tiger heart white dragon had happened 2 years ago. After hearing the story, Li Dingzi realized something was off. He figured out that Han Jue wasn't the real cause. The demonic beasts were already going crazy before he even got there. He suspected a fiendish cult had set a trap for the dragon, which is the only reason Han Jue survived. But one thing still bothered him. He asked what kind of technique Han Jue used to outrun the tiger heart white dragon. Han Jue just casually said he picked something up, but Li Dingzi was floored, yelling that not even a golden core expert could match that demon's speed. Li Dingzi explained that their first priority was to deal with the rampaging beasts. Han Jue cut straight to the point, asking if the sect master was just going to kill the dragon and get it over with. The sect master scoffed at the idea. He said the tiger heart white dragon had supreme potential, and killing it would be a huge waste. He figured Han Jue's master sent him here for a reason, to collect merit points by handling this beast. Believing Han Jue had more tricks up his sleeve, Li Dingzi pointed at him and gave him a new mission: go tame it. Han Jue immediately shut him down. He said he wasn't interested and just wanted to cultivate in peace. Li Dingzi got frustrated, but then changed his approach. He promised to set up a formation to trap the beasts so Han Jue wouldn't be in danger. To sweeten the deal, he offered a huge reward if he succeeded: the pure jade sect's ultimate technique. At that exact moment, a system window appeared. It gave him 2 choices. He could accept the mission to tame the dragon and get the ultimate technique, but it would also earn him the Demon King's hatred and the attention of the viridescent nether cult. He could reject the mission, continue cultivating, and get a simple sword manual, but the sect master's favorability would drop. The 2 risks from the first option were exactly the kind of trouble Han Jue spent his life avoiding. Han Jue didn't even hesitate. He just gave a flat, no thanks. The sect master was stunned for a moment, then stormed off in frustration. He couldn't believe Fairy Shi Xuan would accept such an useless disciple. Li Dingzi muttered to himself, completely baffled that Han Jue would turn down such a great opportunity. He sighed, realizing he'd have to handle everything himself. But then, his expression shifted. He felt a powerful presence and knew exactly who it was: a demon king. Suddenly, a massive, shadowy beast with glowing purple eyes appeared before him. The creature seemed impressed, acknowledging that the sect master was skilled enough to sense its presence from so far away. The demon king let out a furious roar, showing its sharp teeth, but Li Dingzi just scoffed, completely unfazed by the display. He simply accepted the challenge, ready to deal with it. Without another word, the sect master released a massive wave of red energy. The blast shot forward, aimed at the swarm of demonic beasts gathering before him. Meanwhile, far from the fight, 2 other disciples were making their way through the woods. The woman explained their orders from her master. The demonic beasts in the area had gone berserk, and they needed to find Han Jue immediately. As they walked, she suddenly stopped. Her eyes narrowed as she looked ahead, telling her partner that she could sense a major commotion just up the path. When they got closer, they both froze, their eyes wide with shock. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, completely stunned by the scene of destruction in front of them. Before them, a huge part of the forest had been completely leveled, leaving nothing but stumps. The woman wondered if the rampaging demonic beasts were responsible for all this, but her partner knew better, pointing out how clean the cuts were. This wasn't the work of a wild mob. It was done by a supreme sword technique. Suddenly, a woman's voice called out for her junior brother. He seemed surprised to see her, asking why she was there. A young woman with blonde hair playfully announced her arrival. A moment later, a man named Manhwa stepped forward and formally introduced himself to Han Jue. Manhwa explained that their master had sent them to help, since the demonic beasts had gone on a rampage. He then pointed to the cleared forest and asked what happened. Chang Yue quickly lied, saying a powerful senior had rescued her from a group of beasts. Realizing the situation was worse than they thought, His expression grew serious. He decided to examine the surroundings himself, telling his junior sister to get some rest while he was gone. Back inside, the senior sister gave Han Jue a serious warning. She explained their master was worried because there were rumors that the viridescent nether cult had already infiltrated the demon realm. Han Ju calmly took a sip of tea as he put the pieces together. He realized the cult's presence was why the system had warned him about attracting attention. It also explained why the sect master himself was here. This place was far more dangerous than it seemed. The senior sister looked at Han Jue, but he just suggested they leave the demon realm altogether. She was shocked, questioning if he meant they should desert their post. Before she could argue, Manhwa crashed through the door, screaming for them to activate activate the barrier. Chang Yue calmly told him the barrier had been active the whole time. Menghe was breathing hard, covered in dirt and scratches. He admitted that he'd just encountered an enormous demonic beast and had almost died. Chang Yue rushed to Menghe's side, urging him to stop talking and focus on healing himself. Despite coughing up blood, he explained that he'd seen a group of beasts trapped in an array from a distance. But just as he was about to head back, a powerful golden core demon ambushed him. The close call left Chang Yue shaken. She finally understood just how dangerous his place was and why Han Jue had wanted to leave so badly. At that moment, Menghe suddenly tensed up. He warned the others that the presence of the demonic beasts was getting stronger and they were moving fast. Looking out, his eyes widened in horror. The target of that rapidly moving horde was them. A tidal wave of monstrous creatures stampeded towards the pavilion. It was a storm of claws and fury, closing the distance in seconds. Menghe stared at the approaching horde, panicking that the barrier wouldn't be able to hold them back. Han Jue, however, had a much simpler question. Why weren't they running? Chang Yue was torn, arguing that if they left, they'd be deserting their post. Han Jue just shrugged, telling her she could stay and wait for death if she wanted to be a hero. That blunt statement seemed to snap Menghe out of it. He declared that Han Jue was right. Survival was all that mattered. He gave the order for everyone to go, now. Without another moment of hesitation, they unleashed their power and fled. They abandoned the pavilion, moving as fast as they possibly could. The horde crashed through the pavilion, tearing it to pieces in an instant. But as the group watched from a safe distance, they noticed something strange. The beasts didn't stop or turn. It seemed their real target wasn't the group after all. As they fled, Menghe was confused. The beast horde hadn't been targeting them after all, and he wondered what the demon sect was really planning. Suddenly, his eyes shot open. He sensed an incredibly strong demonic aura right behind them. A terrifying creature with glowing red eyes appeared out of nowhere. It was a giant fiend beast, a monster from the Golden Core realm. As the creature dove down to attack, Menghe grabbed Chang Yue, pulling her to safety. But when Menghe looked for his other companion, he saw Han Jue was already gone. He was furious, realizing the coward had just left them behind to die. At that exact moment, Chang Yue's eyes filled with terror. She looked up at the sky and screamed a warning to Menghe about something above them. He looked up and his heart sank. It wasn't just one beast. They were completely surrounded by 6 or 7 of the monstrous creatures. Trapped with no way out, a look of pure despair washed over Menghe's face. He knew it was over. They were completely doomed. But this was the moment Han Jue had been preparing for. By rejecting the sect master's dangerous mission, he was rewarded with a supreme sword technique. It was called the 3 Pure Shadow Sword Technique, an ability that let him turn his own energy into powerful sword shadows. He could use it over and over again until his spirit energy ran out. Just when they thought it was over, Han Jue appeared out of nowhere, standing right in front of Chang Yue. He shielded her as dozens of golden sword shadows shot out from him. The blades of light sliced through the air, heading straight for the beasts. His eyes were cold and completely focused, watching the attack unfold. This wasn't a desperate fight for survival. It was a simple test of his new power. The fight was over in an instant. Chang Yue just sat there on the ground, completely stunned by what she had just seen. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. That was a Golden Core realm beast, a monster they were supposed to run from. She knew if she hadn't seen it herself, she never would have believed how powerful Han Jue really was. It wasn't just one monster. A Golden Core beast and 6 other powerful demons were all wiped out in seconds. They were completely obliterated, like they were nothing more than dust. She looked over at Han Jue, seeing the cold, focused look in his eyes. It was a side of him she'd never seen before, and it was a little scary. Still, she couldn't help but think how strong and cool he looked in that moment. The intense warrior was gone, and the old Han Jue was back. He was already gathering materials from the beasts, excited about exchanging them for spirit stones. He figured he'd just kneel and apologize to their master for the trouble. But Chang Yue had other plans. She was furious at Menghe for abandoning them and was determined to report him. When they finally got back to the teleportation formation, someone was already there waiting. It was Menghe, the senior who had abandoned them. Tears were streaming down his face as he shouted in disbelief, overjoyed that they were actually still alive. His relief didn't last long. Before he could even finish speaking, Chang Yue's fist connected squarely with his face. She was furious, demanding to know why he thought the beasts wouldn't eat them after he ran. While Menghe sputtered an apology, Han Jue just ignored the drama. He told her to take her time, then turned to enter the formation. Not wanting to be left behind, Chang Yue grabbed Menghe by the ear and started dragging him along with her. After they returned, Han Jue went to sell the materials he'd collected from the beasts. It was a route he'd never even considered taking before, and it was about to change his perspective on a few things. Turns out, killing beasts was incredibly profitable. He sold the materials for almost 400 superior grade spirit stones, way more than he ever expected. For a second, he seriously thought about going back to hunt more, but Chang Yue told him not to even think about it. She explained that the 10,000 10,000 demon realm was basically a protected area for raising valuable beasts, and disciples weren't supposed to kill them. This time was a special situation, so they'd probably get away with it. Hearing that, Han Jue immediately decided it was better to just stay in seclusion and cultivate like always. The money he had was more than enough for now. When they finally stood before their master, she asked why the three of them had returned. Han Jue immediately fell to his knees, putting on a big show. He claimed the demon realm was overrun with fiends and beasts, and he just couldn't stay there any longer, begging for 100 years of punishment. The master calmly asked what he would do if she forbid him from cultivating during those 100 years. Han Jue's face fell. That was the one thing he couldn't accept. Seeing his panic, Chang Yue quickly spoke up, insisting that none of this was his fault. She then turned and pointed right at Manhwa. She told the master that when the beasts attacked, their senior Manhwa had abandoned them and ran away. But the master's response was not what she expected. She said that while Menghe didn't help, their own weakness was the real issue. She argued it was better for one person to escape with information than for all three to die together. Chang Yue was left completely speechless. The master concluded that Manhwa hadn't broken any sect rules. He was just protecting himself. With that, she dismissed both him and Chang Yue. As they left, Han Jue stayed behind, wondering what his master was really trying to do. Han Jue immediately started to panic. He was sure his master had kept him behind just to scold him. He couldn't help but wonder if she was suspicious of him again and when this would ever end. But she didn't scold him. Instead, she asked him a simple, direct question. What was he cultivating for? Han Ju was caught off guard, realizing she wanted to know his ambitions. Han Jue's answer was immediate and clear. He was cultivating for immortality. His master wasn't impressed. She told him that if he kept hiding away, he'd never find the opportunities he needed to live forever. He tried to explain that he just wanted to build his strength first, so he'd be ready for any opportunity. But inside, he was frustrated. He knew his master couldn't possibly understand that he had unparalleled potential and top-notch natural gifts. The master sighed. She revealed that she'd originally planned a big opportunity for him, one that would have made him a core disciple. Since he'd given that up, she had another idea. She offered him a chance at a special cave abode, even better than the Thunder spiritual pool. Han Jue was immediately interested and asked where it was. The master told him it was nearby, but there was a catch. To get it, he'd have to place in the top 3 during the intersect assessment. The moment he heard the word assessment, Han Jue got nervous. His first question was, his master looked annoyed. She couldn't believe he was afraid of a simple fight, reminding him that no one's life would be on the line. Han Jue needed to be sure. He asked if any Golden Core disciples would be participating. His master scoffed at the idea, explaining that cultivators at that level were far too important to compete. She confirmed that all the participants would be at the Foundation Establishment realm, just like him. And just like that, the master declared that the matter was settled. Han Jue's entire personality seemed to flip in an instant. With a greedy grin, he thanked his master for her advice and promised to win face for their peak. He made it very clear he was going to take that cave abode for himself. His master watched him, completely unimpressed. She knew all along that the little brat wouldn't be able to resist such a tempting offer. With his new goal set, Han Jue arrived at the sect's spiritual pool building. He was ready to pay for a long cultivation session, equivalent to 100 spiritual stones. Inside, he reminded himself that he had 8 years before the intersect assessment. He knew he had to use every moment to get stronger. The administrator assigned him his spot and sent him on his way. As he walked, his mind was already on his goal, to reach his peak potential in less than 8 years and save some spiritual stones. His incredible looks immediately caught the attention of some other disciples, who whispered about the handsome guy from Serene Peak. But Han Jue didn't care at all, thinking they were silly for not appreciating the joy of cultivation, and headed straight for the Wind Spiritual Pool. He arrived at the Wind Spiritual Pool, and it was impressive. He could immediately tell the sect had all kinds of training grounds. The environment here felt much better than the Thunder Spiritual Pool. With this new location, Han Jue set a clear goal for himself. Before the intersect assessment, he was going to raise all 6 of his cultivation potentials to the 9th level of the Foundation Establishment realm. Just as he was getting ready to start, he heard something off to the side. He turned his head, wondering what was going on over there. It was a group of disciples, ganging up on one guy named Zhou Fan. They laughed at him, mocking him for still being at the 1st level of the Foundation Establishment realm. They brought up how he once boasted he'd surpass them, and now they were telling him to kneel if he wanted them to leave him alone. Han Jue watched this whole thing unfold while casually eating a slice of watermelon. For a moment, he considered just going over and beating them up. But then, he remembered his rule: where there are people, there are problems. He decided it was best to just ignore it and focus on his own cultivation. As Han Jue watched, his system suddenly flashed a notification. It wasn't just some random alert. It had detected something called Connate Providence from the guy getting beat up. His eyes shot open in surprise. This was something completely new. Just then, another disciple stepped in, and he looked serious. He called the bullies trash for causing problems at the spiritual pools. He then accused them of trying to start trouble inside the sect, while the fiendish cult was on the move, threatening to report them as spies. The senior disciple gave them one last threatening look before leaving. At that moment, Han Jue's system pulled up Zhou Fan's full story. Turns out, he was the reincarnation of a Mahayana cultivator, and a powerful treasure hidden in his soul was slowing him down. But the system noted The treasure was almost done, repairing itself. Han Jue finally understood. Zhou Fan's backstory was so impressive. He was basically the protagonist of a novel. A little angel on his shoulder told him to help, promising huge rewards in the future. But the devil on his other shoulder screamed at him, reminding him that side characters who get involved with protagonists always end up dead. The choice was easy for him. Han Jue decided to forget the whole thing, concluding that his own cultivation was way more important. He tossed his watermelon rind aside and left Zhou Fan on the ground, just giving him a silent word of encouragement in his head. 8 years passed in a flash. Han Jue finished his long session at the fire spiritual pool, right on time for the intersect assessment. He checked his progress. His water and earth potentials were at the 8th level, while fire, thunder, wind, and wood had all reached the 9th level of the foundation establishment realm. Just as he was feeling good about his progress, he saw something that made him freeze. His eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't understand what he was looking at. It was Zhou Fan. The same guy he'd left on the ground 8 years ago was standing there, talking with an elegant woman under an umbrella. He looked completely different now, much more mature and composed. Han Jue couldn't believe it was the same person. The woman told Zhou Fan she was sorry, explaining that he was a good guy, and that was the problem. Hearing that, his hand clenched into a tight fist. He was clearly hurt by her words. As she walked away, Han Jue watched the whole thing from a distance. He couldn't help but think this was exactly why he stayed away from relationships. It was just a bunch of headaches that got in the way of cultivation. Just as Han Jue was about to leave, Zhou Fan suddenly whipped around. His eyes were glowing as he shouted for Han Jue to stop right there. Zhou Fan walked right up and introduced himself, saying a senior Mo had told him that Han Jue would become a huge deal in the sect. Han Jue's mind immediately started racing. He was sure this guy was a classic main character, the kind who would drag him into all sorts of dangerous trouble. But instead of challenging him, Zhou Fan dropped to his knees. He explained that he'd heard Han Jue was popular with girls and begged to know how to win a girl's heart. Han Jue was completely thrown off. He was expecting a fight, not this. Zhou Fan pleaded with him for guidance, so Han Jue gave him a lecture, telling him to let it go because cultivators shouldn't be trapped by love. He asked what girls even mattered when, if you obtained the Great Tao, the whole world would be yours. Han Jue finished by saying it was something Zhou Fan had to figure out for himself. For some reason, those words hit Zhou Fan hard. A strange, emotional look came over his face, as if his heart had been moved. Han Jue just smirked, and thinking to himself that this idiot couldn't possibly compare to his own looks. At that exact moment, the system chimed in, showing that Zhou Fan now had a good impression of him. Han Jue couldn't believe how ridiculous this all was. A loud bell rang out, calling all the disciples together. Han Jue figured it had to be about the intersect assessment. Just then, a senior brother walked up with a friendly smile, happy to see him after so long. As they walked up the long flight of stairs, the senior brother mentioned there was something he wanted to ask. Han Jue calmly told him to go ahead. The senior brother then asked a very specific question. He wanted to know if Han Jue knew a woman by the name of Xing Hongshuan. Han Jue's eyes shot open in disbelief. He was completely caught off guard, wondering how in the world this guy knew about her. The senior brother stopped and asked him a very direct question. He wanted to know if Han Jue knew someone named Xing Hongshuan. Han Jue played dumb, asking why he'd want to know. So, the senior brother started to explain. He told Han Jue that for years, the sect master had been secretly fighting the viridescent nether cult, and the only reason they were unharmed was thanks to information from a spy inside the cult. That information allowed the sect master to set up a successful ambush. The senior brother then revealed the spy's name, Xing Hongshuan. Turns out, she was forced to take poison when she was young and was threatened into spying on the Jade Pure sect. She hated every moment of it and even tried to steal an antidote from an outer sect alchemist. He explained that she was a good person who chose to do the right thing. Because of her help, the sect master saved her and even made an exception, allowing her to become an official disciple of the inner sect. The senior brother seemed to think she was a real hero. He continued, saying that Xing Hongshuan was now training under Taoist Jingshu. But here's the thing. When they met her, she was asking around for a disciple named Han Jue, who used to be an alchemist's servant. The senior brother looked at Han Jue with a knowing smile, pointing out that they just so happened to have a disciple with that exact name right here. He asked if that was just a coincidence. Inside his head, Han Jue was absolutely losing it. He couldn't believe that woman had actually told them everything, completely blowing his cover. With no other choice, Han Jue admitted it. He told the senior brother that he was the Han Jue she knew, explaining that he didn't have a choice back then. To his surprise, the senior brother just laughed and put a friendly arm around him, saying he understood completely. He was just shocked that Han Jue had such incredible cultivation potential. The senior brother promised that the peak would provide him with the best resources they had, but Han Jue was barely listening. He was thinking about Xing Hongshuan's difficult life, feeling a bit guilty. The system showed her favorability towards him was incredibly high, and he thought to himself that he didn't deserve it. Since she liked him so much, he genuinely hoped she wouldn't have to face any more hardships. Soon after, all the disciples were gathered together. The sect master announced that the intersect assessment was about to begin, and each peak needed to send at least 10 disciples. Immediately, the entire crowd erupted, with everyone desperately begging to be chosen. The disciples were buzzing with excitement, talking about the rewards. The winner would get the Jade Stream inheritance, 500 top-quality spirit stones, and a spirit ice pier. But Hanjue wasn't impressed. He was wondering why there was no mention of the Khanate cave abode he wanted. Seeing how enthusiastic everyone was, Hanjue decided to just raise his hand to show some support and not look like an outcast. It was a huge mistake. The sect master's voice cut through the noise, selecting Hanjue as the very first participant. Everyone, including Hanjue, looked completely stunned. He immediately started panicking, trying to explain that he was just showing support and it didn't count. But the master didn't care at all. She told him that raising his hand was enough, and with the quota filled, she ordered everyone to leave, except for Hanjue. As the other disciples walked away, they started whispering among themselves. They figured the master was giving Hanjue a private session, thinking that talented people really do get whatever they want. They hurried off, not wanting to make her angry. Once the hall was empty, the sect master walked towards Hanjue. She stopped a short distance away and looked him over. She admitted that his cultivation had improved again and that she had really underestimated him. She continued, saying that even with just 3 attributes, his cultivation speed was outstanding, probably the fastest in the entire Jade Pure sect. Hanjue bowed his head and gave a polite answer, saying it was all thanks to her excellent teaching. But his master wasn't fooled for a second. She bluntly stated that she didn't remember teaching him anything. She then pointed out that his cultivation and sword techniques, while good, were not from the Jade Pure sect. Hanjue was left sweating, completely lost for words. The sect master looked at him with an understanding gaze. She explained that she knew his skills came from somewhere else, but she also knew he wasn't a threat to the sect. She figured he must have stumbled upon some huge opportunity when he was young, and that was that. She told him that everyone runs into lucky chances, so she wouldn't ask any more questions. Instead, she encouraged him to show his full strength in the upcoming assessment without any worries. Hanjue was so relieved he could only thank her for her support. Then, to avoid any unnecessary trouble for him, she dropped a bombshell. She declared that from that day forward, he was her personal disciple. Hanju's eyes shot wide open in complete disbelief. At that exact moment, the system chimed in with a notification. It confirmed his status had risen in the sect and that he was now a personal disciple. As a reward, he got a brand new magic manual, the 9 Dragons Devil, Expelling Seal. Snapping out of his shock, Hanjue immediately dropped to one knee. He thanked his new master with everything he had, completely overwhelmed by this turn of events. His master watched him, a faint, pleased smile on her face. It was clear she was happy with her choice. She then presented him with a personal jade medal, a token of his new status. With that, she told him he could leave, and Hanjue quickly agreed. Back in his room, Hanjue began to learn the new skill he'd received. The system immediately confirmed it was complete. He had mastered the 9 Dragons Devil, Expelling Seal, in an instant. Golden energy flared around him as he felt the new power settle within him. He looked at his hand, feeling the energy crackle at his fingertips. He realized this was his 3rd magic spell, and it was a versatile palm technique. The most interesting part was that its effects could change completely depending on what kind of spirit energy he used. With another trump card up his sleeve, he felt a bit more prepared for the assessment. But then, his natural caution kicked in. He realized that both his 3 Shadow Sword technique and this new seal were far too destructive. Using them would draw way too much attention, which was the last thing he wanted. Suddenly, a cheerful voice called out his name. A young woman with blonde hair appeared, asking if he was confident about the intersect assessment. Hanju was clearly surprised to see his senior sister there. He immediately asked how she managed to get into his private space. She just laughed it off, calling it a secret. She then told him to come with her, saying it was his first time in the assessment. As they walked, she explained that their master had sent her to go over the rules. All 18 peaks had set up an arena, and disciples would battle each other until only the top 10 remained. Those 10 would then compete in a final event for the whole sect to see. She then showed him that his first battle was scheduled for the next day at Tianju Peak. Hanjue processed this information and realized something important. He asked her if this meant that the early rounds, before the top 10 was decided, wouldn't have many spectators. She looked at him and confirmed that was right. Hearing this, she got excited, thinking he was aiming for the top 3. She told him that with his strength, he could definitely do it. Hanju just let out a quiet and gave a vague answer, not wanting to admit his real goal was to cause as little stir as possible. His senior sister gave him a cheerful wink, wishing him luck before heading off to report back to their master. Once she was gone, Hanju felt a wave of relief. This was perfect. He could compete in the assessment without drawing too much attention. But just as he was thinking that, a woman's voice called out to him, calling him darling. Hanjue looked up, completely stunned to see a woman with bright red hair standing over him. He jumped back, completely flustered, and told her not to call him that. She just laughed, teasingly asking if he'd forgotten their agreement from back in the outer sect. Hanju's face fell as he remembered. It was all an act, because he was genuinely afraid she would kill him if he refused. She looked at him seriously, telling him that she took it to heart. She thanked him for not betraying her back then, admitting that without him, she never would have been able to achieve her current status. Her expression sharpened as she asked if the rumors were true, that he was already at the 9th stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Hanjue admitted he was just one step away, explaining that the assessment had delayed his breakthrough. Hearing that, she decided she had something that could help him. She told him to wait a moment while she searched for it. She pulled out a small bottle explaining that it was a jade pure pill. She said she didn't like using it, so he could have it. Han Jue looked at the bottle, then back at her, and politely suggested she should keep it for herself. She insisted he take it, saying she gets them regularly anyway. Han Jue explained that wasn't the issue. He told Hong Xuan that he was cultivating under his master, Taoist Jingxu, and was already well taken care of, so she didn't have to worry about him. She wished him luck, admitting she never realized he was such a prodigy. She said that while her own talent was just average, she promised to do her absolute best to help him in the future. After she left, Han Jue was just completely speechless. He stood there for a moment, his sword glowing with a sudden burst of energy as he tried to process everything she'd just said. He looked down at the jade pure pill in his hand. He realized this was the reason for her intense feelings. This was more than just a simple gift. Far away, in a quiet hall, a master sat across from their disciple. The room was empty, setting the stage for a serious conversation. The master, Taoist Jingxu, asked Hong Xuan if she regretted giving the jade pure pill to that kid. Hong Xuan simply smiled and admitted she didn't, because she had fallen for him. Her master immediately dismissed that as nonsense. She asked suspiciously if Hong Xuan was only doing this because the boy had good looks. Hong Xuan cheekily asked if that wasn't reason enough. Her master insisted it wasn't worth it, but Hong Xuan got serious. She explained that his talent was also outstanding, revealing that he was already at the 9th stage, even though he hadn't even started cultivating when she first met him. Taoist Jingxu found that strange, wondering why she'd never heard of him before. Hong Xuan explained that he's been keeping a low profile and cultivating in secret. She even added that he'd rejected an opportunity from the sect master because he was afraid of death. That last part caught her master's attention, a new look of interest on her face. Han Jue started to get a bad feeling. He clearly remembered being told that a big audience would only show up for the top 10 fighters, but the nervous sweat on his brow told me something was very, very wrong. Turns out, he was completely wrong. The arena was massive, packed with thousands and thousands of people. Spectators were flying in on magical beasts, and the whole place was buzzing with excitement. He immediately started to panic, wondering how on earth he was supposed to keep a low profile now. Right at that moment, the system chimed in, giving him two choices. He could either go all out and shock the crowd for a big reward, or try to stay quiet, aim for the top 3, and get a bunch of treasures instead. If you liked the story, subscribe for the next part. Thank you. The choice was simple. He could win in a flashy way and get 1,000 spirit stones, or he could keep a low profile, make the top 3, and get a numinous treasure. For Han Jue, it wasn't even a debate. A treasure that rare was way more valuable, and the second option perfectly matched his goal of staying unnoticed. He felt a sense of peace with his decision. The system seemed to understand him perfectly, always giving him a path to stay out of the spotlight. He figured if he could just keep this up, he could stay hidden until he was strong enough to face anything. An announcer's voice boomed across the arena, declaring the first match. Han Jue from the Jade Serene Peak versus Lu Renjia from the Tianju Peak. Down in the crowd, a pink-haired girl got super excited, telling her friend that Han Jue's match was about to start. She was totally confident, telling her friend that Han Jue was incredible and would definitely surprise everyone. But just a moment later, her smile vanished, replaced by a look of complete confusion as she watched what was happening on stage. Instead of fighting, Han Jue just ran. He dodged and weaved, scrambling away from every single attack his opponent threw at him. He looked absolutely terrified, like a kid crying for his mom. His opponent, Lu Renjia, was getting seriously annoyed. He couldn't believe he was stuck fighting such a pathetic guy in the first round. He complained that there was no thrill in it at all. The crowd was getting restless. People started calling the fight boring and meaningless, since all Han Jue did was run. Some even started to get up and leave, deciding to go watch a more exciting match instead. But while everyone else was leaving, the purple-haired man stared intently at the stage. A dark look crossed his face as he realized the truth. He knew Han Jue was doing this on purpose. He kept dodging, thinking to himself that this whole act was getting exhausting. He took a quick look around and was relieved to see that most of the audience had left. His plan was working perfectly. Seeing that even the judges had fallen asleep, Han Jue knew this was his chance. But at that exact moment, his opponent, Lu Renjia, completely lost his temper. He shouted that he was tired of this game and was going to end it right now. Lu Renjia boasted that Han Jue was just a stepping stone for his own glory. But before he could even finish, Han Jue was already behind him with a terrifying grin. The opponent froze, completely stunned by his impossible speed. The dust from the impact settled, revealing Lu Renjia unconscious on the ground. The judges jolted awake, wondering what in the world had just happened. They couldn't believe their eyes. Somehow, Han Jue was the one left standing. The announcer declared Han Jue the winner. His friends immediately asked why he didn't just win directly. Han Jue just shrugged and gave a weak excuse, saying it took him a while to find his opponent's weakness. Turns out, all of Han Jue's other matches went the exact same way. He would make the fight so boring that the audience and even the judges would just leave. The purple-haired man sighed, saying that people just didn't know how to appreciate his talent. The pink-haired girl pouted, complaining that it really felt like Han Jue was avoiding her on purpose. Her friend just told her she was making her feelings a little too obvious. He tried to explain explained that Hanjue was a dedicated cultivator who didn't want any distractions. She asked what the point of living was if he only focused on training. Her friend looked off into the distance, explaining that Hanjue's goal was something else entirely, immortality, the great Tao. The purple-haired man finally understood. He told his friend that he and Hanjue were just different kinds of people. He had to admit, he was no match for that level of focus. Meanwhile, Hanjue was already thinking ahead. His strategy of boring the audience away had worked so far, but now that he was in the top 10, it would be much harder to keep a low profile. He was also surprised that Zhou Fan had made it this far and decided he needed to get stronger just in case things went wrong. As he sat there, a strange feeling washed over him. He heard the sound of wind, but when he looked around, not a single leaf was moving. A chill went down his spine as he wondered if he was being haunted, just as a dark, purple energy began to swirl around him. The strange energy grew thicker, closing in on him from all sides. Whatever was targeting him, it was getting ready to make its move, but he didn't even flinch. In an instant, a brilliant golden light erupted from him, blasting away the darkness. He unleashed one of his strongest techniques, the 9 Dragons Devil Expelling Seal. The massive seal of light slammed down with incredible force, meant to crush whatever was hiding in the shadows. The impact was huge, but as the light faded, he was surprised to see that something was left. Dark, shadowy pieces of the creature still remained, not completely destroyed. Hanjue looked annoyed. He couldn't believe this thing was still holding on. With a final burst of power, he intended to wipe every last trace of it from existence. He poured on the pressure, hitting the shadowy remains with blast after blast of golden energy. He wasn't going to stop until every last piece of it was gone for good. But then, a voice suddenly screamed out from inside the darkness. It was desperate, begging him to wait and stop the attack. Hanjue froze. He couldn't believe it. The creature was intelligent, but his surprise quickly turned back into anger as he ordered the monster to leave this place immediately. The shadowy form finally revealed its true shape, an old man, and he was furious. He yelled at Hanjue to stop, revealing that he was the great grand elder of the Jade Pure sect. He couldn't believe a disciple would show such disrespect. Hanjue's eyes went. The elder angrily claimed he was just passing by and accused Hanjue of attacking people without reason. But Hanjue wasn't intimidated. He just pointed out how suspicious the old man was, sneaking around in the middle of the night. The elder huffed, insisting he was just cultivating a divine art. But inside his head, the elder was panicking. He couldn't believe what had just happened. That attack had almost destroyed his primordial spirit. He was certain that even if he'd been there in his real body, he wouldn't have survived. He was completely shaken, wondering if all the inner disciples were this monstrous now. Hanjue calmly told the elder he was going to report this whole thing to his master. That one threat completely changed everything. The elder immediately started panicking, begging him not to tell her and apologizing over and over. Hanjue was surprised by the sudden change and asked if he knew his master. The old man puffed out his chest, revealing that Hanju's master was actually his own disciple, and so was the current sect master. But Hanjue didn't seem to care at all. He just told him to leave. Seeing that his status meant nothing, the elder quickly changed his approach, offering to pass on his legacy to the talented young man. He offered to teach Hanjue the heavenly constellation golden body. The elder explained that within the entire sect, only he and the sect master knew this technique. The name alone sounded pretty impressive, and for a moment, Hanjue looked like he was considering it, but his answer was a flat no. The elder was stunned for a second, then stormed off in a huff. As he watched him go, Hanjue couldn't shake his suspicion. He had almost killed the guy, so why was he suddenly being so nice? He decided it had to be a trap, and that he should ask his master about what happened. So he went to his master and told her everything. She listened patiently, then sighed, saying that the old man was misbehaving again. She promised Hanjue that she would look for him, and if he dared to bother him again, she would deal with him personally. With that settled, she told him to go get some rest. Just as he was about to leave, one last thing came to mind. He turned back and asked his master if the heavenly constellation golden body was actually a good technique. He explained that it was what the elder had offered to teach him. His master admitted the technique was incredible, maybe the strongest in the whole sect, but she explained there was a huge catch. To cultivate it, a man would have to cut off his roots. Hanjue's mind raced as he realized what she meant. That old man really was up to no good. A wild thought suddenly hit him. If that was the requirement, did that mean the great grand elder and even the sect leader had done it? His master quickly coughed and warned him that this was a secret that could never be spread. Hanjue immediately understood and said he was leaving. As he walked away, he couldn't help but think about how extreme those leaders were. He figured they must have done it just to stay away from women, which was a level of dedication he found truly insane. Sometime later, the final battle for the top 10 in the intersect assessment was about to begin. Spectators from all the different peaks had gathered in the city. The entire arena was packed with a cheering crowd, buzzing with excitement. Standing there, Hanjue realized his old plan of acting weak wasn't going to work. With this many people watching, it would be impossible to keep a low profile. He started to wonder if he should just drop the act and end his match quickly. Just then, a voice called out his name from the side. Hanjue turned around, surprised to see who it was. Turns out, a whole group of his fellow disciples had come just to support him. They were cheering for him to get first place, holding up signs and shouting his name. Hanjue was a little speechless at all the attention, but he thanked them for coming. But then, his eyes locked onto another fighter across the arena. It was Zhou Fan. The friendly mood instantly vanished as he recognized one of his strongest opponents. Across the arena, Zhou Fan was getting a serious warning from one of his allies. He was told that Han Jue was his strongest opponent in this assessment. The ally was convinced Han Jue had been hiding his true strength and was just as powerful as any of the top disciples. But Zhou Fan just scoffed at the warning. He was completely confident, claiming that with the new trump card he had, Han Jue was no match for him. At that moment, a pink-haired girl from Han Ju's group of supporters shouted with excitement, certain that he would take first place. Her cheering immediately drew the attention of a blonde woman standing nearby. She glared over at the girl, her expression cold and annoyed. She then demanded to know who she was. The pink-haired girl shot back, asking why she cared. The tension between them was so thick, you could practically see sparks flying. The blonde woman warned her to grow up, saying her behavior could get Han Jue into serious trouble. But before they could argue any further, another woman with red hair chimed in, sweetly calling Han Jue her darling. That one word instantly united the other two. They turned on her, furiously demanding who she thought she was to call him that. Meanwhile, one of the male disciples who'd come to support Han Jue was just huddled in a corner, completely terrified. He watched the whole thing unfold and thinking to himself that this was an absolute catastrophe. Suddenly, a commanding voice boomed over the crowd, shouting for silence. An elder stood before everyone and announced that the top 10 assessment was finally beginning. He declared the very first match, Han Jue versus Zhou Fan. The entire arena erupted in cheers, especially for Zhou Fan. Everyone was talking about him, the rising star who was making an incredible comeback. They buzzed about how he'd been crushing his opponents in seconds and had even gotten his hands on a powerful treasure. Seeing all the girls cheering for Han Jue, Zhou Fan glared at him with pure jealousy. He accused Han Jue of lying about not being close with any girls. But Han Jue was just as miserable. This was the exact kind of attention he'd been trying to avoid. But his jealousy quickly turned into determination. Zhou Fan declared that this time, things would be different. A crackling purple energy began to gather in the palm of his hand. He shouted that Han Jue would have to give it his all to survive this. The purple lightning exploded around him as he equipped a powerful gauntlet. This was the treasure. Zhou Fan stood ready, his gauntlet crackling with immense power. He yelled out, telling Han Jue to give it everything he had. He was so sure of his victory that he actually offered Han Jue the first move. With a confident smirk, he told him to go right ahead. Han Jue just accepted it, telling Zhou Fan that he brought this on himself. At that moment, the elder overseeing the match shouted for the battle to begin. The moment the match started, Han Jue didn't waste a second. A huge blade of golden energy just appeared out of nowhere. Zhou Fan stared, completely caught off guard. Golden energy exploded around Han Jue as he prepared to put everything into a single attack. He warned Zhou Fan to get ready. Zhou Fan's confidence completely vanished, replaced by pure shock. He thought he had the advantage, but a chilling feeling told him he was wrong. Suddenly, he remembered the warning he'd received from someone else. It was a memory of his friend, Mo Fuchu, a powerful core disciple. Mo had told him that Han Jue's abilities were unquestionable, and that even he didn't think he was on the same level. He described Han Jue as unfathomable, and someone to be seen as a rival, not an enemy. Mo Fuchu had even said that exchanging moves with Han Jue would be a great learning experience. But Zhou Fan had been too proud to listen. He had stubbornly declared that he would defeat Han Jue and send him flying. But Zhou Fan just brushed the memory aside. He was convinced he was the one in control of his destiny. He looked at Han Jue and promised to make him regret ever underestimating him. Back in the arena, Han Jue's eyes flared with a blinding golden light. He was done waiting. In response, Zhou Fan unleashed his own terrifying energy. A massive purple shield erupted around him, a defense he believed was unbreakable. A wild grin spread across his face. He taunted Han Jue, declaring that today he would be the one to make him kneel. Han Jue didn't say a word. He just swung his arm, and the giant blade of golden energy crashed down with incredible force. Watching from the crowd, the pink-haired girl looked worried. She knew Zhou Fan was much stronger now with his treasure and a master's training. She feared Han Jue might actually be in trouble. But the blonde woman next to her just scoffed, saying Zhou Fan was nowhere near Han Jue's level. Before they could argue, a flash of light from the arena stopped them cold. They turned back, their eyes wide with shock, realizing the fight was already over. It was over in a single strike. Zhou Fan stood there, his face a mask of pure disbelief. He couldn't even process what had just happened. The purple shield shattered like glass. Zhou Fan was thrown backwards, completely overwhelmed by the force of the attack. He didn't even have time to react. The blast was so powerful, it sent cracks through the arena walls. Even the elders, who had seen countless battles, were stunned, their eyes wide with disbelief. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena, declaring Han Jue the winner. The crowd was just a mess of confusion, asking each other what had even happened. It was over so fast, they barely saw it. The conversation shifted from confusion to awe, as people realized it was an one-move takedown. In the crowd, the pink-haired girl puffed out her cheeks smugly. It was clear she was thinking, "I told you so." But on the stage, Zhou Fan was completely broken. He knew it was over. The most crushing part wasn't just losing. It was the sudden, awful realization realization that Hanjue had been holding back the entire time. With that match settled, the elder moved on to the next round. He announced that it was time for the battle of the top 5. To decide the matchups, they would draw lots, and one lucky person would get to skip straight into the top 3. The elder explained that the lot with the red stripe was the winning one, and of course, the person who drew it was Hanjue. He immediately remembered his master's promise, make it to the top 3 and get his own private cave. With one lucky draw, he'd done it without having to fight again. So just like that, Hanjue was in the top 3. The other matches to decide the finalists weren't nearly as exciting. It was a battle between 2 psychic cultivators, which meant from the outside, it just looked like they were standing perfectly still, staring at each other. The system rewarded him for placing in the top 3. He got a 7th grade treasure, a robe that could automatically block an attack from a soul formation realm cultivator. For someone who hated risk, this was the perfect prize. As they walked, one of the other top disciples couldn't understand why Hanjue was so happy with 3rd place. Hanjue just said his master told him to do his best. The older man leading them seemed impressed and announced their arrival at the main peak. A woman greeted them, congratulating them on becoming elite disciples. As a reward, she told them they would each get to choose their own special living quarters, a Khanate cave abode. She explained that the caves were in a very secluded area. She gave them each a glowing orb to guide them, adding that they would be overseeing the abodes. Hanjue immediately wondered if this was just a fancy way of making them security guards. The first cave was described as being rich in fire and wind energy. The first place winner didn't hesitate and immediately claimed it for himself. The second cave had a mix of water, fire, and wood energy. The second place disciple took that one, hoping to use it to get stronger. That left Hanjue with the last choice. His cave had all the different kinds of spirit energy, but it wasn't as strong as the others. Turns out, this was perfect for him. He happily accepted, thanking Taoist Jingshu. Taoist Jingshu watched him go. She thought to herself that he really was talented, just as Xuan had said. With their choices made, the overseer told them to follow the glowing orbs to their new homes. Hanjue and the others agreed and set off on their own. Hanjue's orb led him to a remote mountain. The entrance was just a tiny crack in the rock, so narrow he could barely squeeze through. But just a few steps later, the path opened up into a blinding light. Inside was a massive, hidden world. It had houses, ponds, and plenty of land. This was way more than just a cave. Once he settled in, Hanjue took out his new robe. It was a treasure from the system, the golden cicada's mystic divine robe. It was incredibly light, but had powerful defensive energy. The best part was, it felt like he was wearing nothing at all. He figured that with this robe, even a nascent soul expert couldn't hurt him. For the first time, he felt truly safe enough to just focus on getting stronger. This new place was so hidden, it would be hard for anyone to find him. He had carved his name at the entrance, hoping that would be enough for anyone looking for him. Turns out, someone was already looking. 2 men arrived at the entrance after a long search. The younger one asked Mofucho if he was sure this was Hanjue's home, and Mofucho told him to look up, certain they were in the right place. Mofucho looked up at the words Hanjue had carved into the rock, endure today, freedom tomorrow. He chuckled, thinking it was exactly the kind of thing Hanjue would do. He called out, and Hanjue appeared from the cave, wondering why they were there. Mofucho's companion explained their reason for visiting. The sect was sending out missions against the viridescent nether cult, and they wanted Hanjue to join them. He promised there were treasures at the cult's branch that would help them all get stronger. Hanjue immediately turned them down. He explained that he couldn't leave because he was about to enter seclusion for a major breakthrough. The companion was stunned, asking if he was already aiming for the Golden Core realm. Hanjue just said it was something like that and tried to end the conversation, turning back toward his cave. But the man grabbed his arm, stopping him. He warned Hanjue that the tribulation for that realm was incredibly dangerous. Then he made his real offer. If Hanjue came with them, he would get first pick of any tribulation transcendence pills they found. The offer hit its mark. Hanjue paused. The companion was sure he had him now, believing that no cultivator could resist the promise of a safer breakthrough. But that's when the system gave Hanjue a choice. He could agree for a worthless spirit stone or reject them and get a piece of equipment. While Mofucho went on about the fame and status they could achieve, Hanjue already knew the answer. The choice was obvious. Hanjue turned them down flat. He explained that he wasn't interested in fame or fortune, but he promised that if the sect was ever in real danger, he would risk his life to defend it. His expression turned dead serious. He told them that right now, all he wanted was to cultivate in peace. His intensity left the other two completely speechless. As the 2 men walked away, the companion couldn't wrap his head around Hanjue's decision. He admitted the guy was powerful, but thought he was way too timid. They both agreed that you can't get stronger just by hiding away. The companion argued that to cultivate, you have to fight for opportunities. He was sure Hanjue would realize his mistake sooner or later. Secretly, he was already thinking about the elixirs they would find, hoping they would be enough to finally surpass him. He made a silent promise to himself. He was going to prove that he was every bit as good as Hanjue. But at that very moment, Hanjue wasn't thinking about them at all. The system rewarded him for rejecting the mission. He got a little universe belt, a powerful storage item that was nearly indestructible. 2 years passed in seclusion. Hanjue's 6 spiritual powers had finally reached their peak. It was time to break through to the Golden Core realm. He knew he couldn't afford to mess this up. Only about 3 out of every 10 cultivators at his level level, ever succeeded in making this jump. He began the process, focusing all of his energy for the breakthrough. The biggest danger wasn't just physical. It was said that during this process, it was easy to give rise to an inner demon. If he failed, the consequences would be severe. Just as he feared, the inner demon appeared. It was a dark, twisted version of himself, born from his own mind. The demon laughed, promising to give him anything he wanted: fame, money, women. It told him to stop hiding and show the world his true strength. But Han Jue's response was simple. He wasn't impressed at all. The demon was completely thrown off. It couldn't understand why its grand offer fell so flat. Han Jue thought the inner demon was pathetic. He mocked it for offering such lame temptations, then destroyed it with a single touch. With the inner demon gone, he could finally focus all his energy on the real challenge. And right on cue, the sky turned dark. The heavenly tribulation had arrived. He didn't hesitate. He activated his 6 paths of reincarnation technique and his divine robe, ready to face whatever was coming. He poured all of his energy into overcoming the tribulation. For a moment, everything was just a blinding flash of power. 7 days later, the system confirmed his success. He had officially broken through to the golden core realm. As a reward, he got a powerful new weapon, the Killing Sword, and learned a new mystical power, the 6 paths soul absorption technique. He was thrilled. His lifespan had increased again. He immediately set a new goal for himself: break through to the nascent soul realm within 100 years. If it took any longer, he'd count it as a loss. Before starting his next round of training, he decided to check on his friends through the system. But what he saw made his heart stop. A flood of alerts filled the screen. His good friend, Li Qingzi, had been attacked by fiendish cultivators. He was severely injured, but had managed to escape. Han Jue knew this meant the sect itself was under attack. He had to go check on his master. He left his cave immediately. The sect was in a state of emergency. A voice was echoing across the grounds, directing the injured disciples and calling for healers. Everywhere he looked, there were wounded disciples. The attack had been brutal. While tending to the wounded, a senior sister spotted him. She looked relieved to see he was safe and told him that his master had been looking for him. He needed to go see her right away. He found his master's hall and formally announced his presence. He bowed, apologizing for being so focused on cultivation that he forgot to visit. His master's response was cold. She said she thought he had already betrayed her. He was at a loss for words, unsure how to defend himself. But she wasn't interested in excuses. She told him the Jade Pure sect was about to face a disaster unlike any it had seen before. Then, she said she was giving him a chance. Her offer was to leave the sect immediately, to run away and save himself. Han Ju was stunned. The sect was really in trouble. His first instinct was to take the offer and run. The system confirmed it. The sect master was in danger, and his fate was unknown. It gave Han Jue 2 choices: leave the sect for a small reward, or stay and fight for a much better one. Han Jue looked at his master and asked what she planned to do. Her answer was simple. She would stay with the sect until the very end. Hearing her resolve, Han Jue made his choice. He declared that he would follow her. She seemed surprised and asked if he wasn't afraid to die. Han Jue confidently told her he wasn't, thinking of the powerful divine robe he possessed. Suddenly, a system notification popped up. His master's favorability towards him had jumped to 3 stars. He got completely distracted, wondering if 1 more star would make her a potential romantic partner. He quickly pushed the thought away, telling himself to focus. His only goal was the path of cultivation. He explained his philosophy. He wouldn't abandon his master. But then, his true nature kicked in. He made it clear that if he ever faced an enemy he couldn't beat, he would save himself first. No questions asked. The master tried to push him away, saying she'd never taught him anything, so he owed her nothing. But Han Jue disagreed. He told her that her kindness was invaluable. She'd helped him get opportunities and handled his problems. He explained that in his 60 years there, she had treated him the best, and he genuinely hoped she would live a long, peaceful life. His words seemed to touch her. She admitted the situation wasn't as bad as it sounded. Turns out, she only told him to leave because she was scared of dying herself. She then offered to help him with his cultivation, but Han Jue politely refused. His master was not happy about being turned down. She dismissed him, and he took his leave immediately. But as soon as he was gone, she turned to her other disciple, Chang Yuer. She told her to get to Han Jue's cave before he did. She handed her a storage pouch with everything she would need to help him. Chang Yuer understood immediately. When Han Jue got back to his cave, he was shocked. His senior sister, Chang Yuer, was already there, waiting for him. She explained that their master had sent her. Her task was to help him set up a formation and plant some spirit herbs to increase the energy in his cave. The formation was made of ruby stones. It would hide the entrance to his cave and trap any intruders in an illusion. The herbs would boost the spiritual energy without needing any care. Han Jue was impressed by how much she knew. She proudly listed off her other skills, like alchemy and talisman crafting. Han Jue was incredibly grateful. He bowed low, thanking both his senior sister and his master for their kindness. She just told him there was no need to thank her. Then she made a surprising offer. She asked if maybe, after a while, she could move in to keep him company. Han Jue was speechless. But Han Jue, completely missing the point, asked if she just wanted to take advantage of his cave for her own cultivation. That was the wrong thing to say. She exploded, yelling that cultivation was all he ever thought about. She told him to get lost and stormed away, leaving him completely confused. 5 years passed. Han Jue had spent all that time cultivating, reaching the 3rd level of the Golden Core realm. He checked his notifications and saw a constant stream of alerts. His friends were all getting attacked by some fiendish cultivator. He felt a wave of relief. It was a good thing he never went out adventuring with them. Suddenly, a system alert popped up. It had detected someone special outside his cave. Hanju's eyes shot open. Someone was here. The system gave him all the details. The man outside was Chen Santian, a powerful disciple from the viridescent nether cult. Hanjue immediately started calculating the risk. Was this guy alone, or was it a trap? Outside, Chen Santian stood before a large stone. He smirked, thinking that if there was only one person here, this would be easy. He laughed to himself, calling the Jade Pure sect a bunch of cowards. He noticed the giant letters carved into the rock face. This had to be a cave dwelling, but he couldn't find an entrance anywhere. The entire cliff face looked solid. Inside the cave, Hanjue heard everything. Being called a coward was the one thing that set him off. He clenched his fist, his power surging. Since this guy was alone, he decided it was time to teach him a lesson. Suddenly, Chen Santian felt it. A wave of pure, overwhelming killing intent washed over him. He froze in terror. Before Chen Santian could even move, a blinding flash of light shot out from the cliff face. His eyes went wide with shock. Hanjue unleashed his 3 pure shadow sword technique. The technique was imbued with so much power that Chen Santian was completely helpless. He was blown away without even a chance to fight back. The moment he hit the ground, Chen Santian started begging for his life. He pleaded with the elder, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding and he was just passing by. He tried to figure out who could be this strong. He'd done his research and knew no one in the Jade Pure sect was this skilled with a sword. He decided it had to be the legendary Great Grand Elder. That's when Hanjue stepped out from the cave. He called Chen Santian by his full name, revealing that he knew he was the eldest disciple of the viridescent nether cult. Chen Santian was stunned. How could this person know his background? But then he got a good look at Hanjue. He was young, handsome, and only at the 9th level of the Foundation Establishment realm. This wasn't the elder. It had to be his disciple. A new idea formed in his mind. Capture him and use him as a hostage. Thinking he finally had the upper hand, Chen Santian drew a weapon. He shouted a threat to the elder he believed was watching, telling him to let him leave alive, or he would kill his disciple right then and there. A voice echoed from the shadows, correcting Chen Santian's big mistake. He didn't have any disciples. The entire hostage plan was completely useless. Chen Santian immediately started backtracking, claiming he was just kidding. His mind was racing. He knew this guy was only at the 9th level, but that had to be a disguise. No one that weak could have beaten him so easily and known his background. He was convinced this was an expert cultivator, and there was no chance of escape. Hanjue looked totally bored. He wondered if this guy was really the great disciple everyone talked about. The fight was just too easy. He told Chen Santian to follow him. The terrified man scrambled to obey, thanking Hanjue for sparing his life. Hanjue led him deeper into his hidden cave. Chen Santian finally understood why he couldn't see the entrance before. It was hidden by a powerful formation. Meanwhile, Hanjue was already thinking ahead. He knew he couldn't just use force to keep him here. He needed a smarter way to make him stay. He considered handing him over to his master, but knew the guy would just try to escape. The truth was, Hanjue was good at fighting, not capturing people. The only reason Chen Santian wasn't running was because he was completely terrified, overestimating Hanjue's power. So, Hanjue came up with a test. He turned to Chen Santian and told him to attack with everything he had. Chen Santian's eyes went wide with panic. He was sure this was just some twisted excuse to kill him. Chen Santian immediately dropped to the ground, begging and promising he'd learned his lesson. But Hanjue wouldn't let it go. He explained that if he didn't get this out of his system now, he'd always be thinking about stabbing him in the back later. Even though Chen Santian knew he had a special robe that could protect him, he still wouldn't dare to fight. He just kept begging for his life. Hanjue sighed, finally giving up on the test. He told the man he could live, but on one condition. He would stay here and take care of the spirit herbs. Hanjue was almost disappointed. He never thought the great disciple would be such a complete coward. Time passed quietly inside the cave, where the spirit herbs glowed with a soft light. But someone was watching from the shadows. He saw the elder sitting there, completely still, deep in cultivation. The watcher was getting restless. He'd been stuck here for a whole year. As a core disciple, he knew his master and the elders would be worried sick if he didn't return soon. He started thinking, maybe he should just ambush him. The man seemed so focused on cultivating. This could be his only chance. His hand began to glow with power. He swore that if he was strong enough, he'd make this man pay 100 times over for whatever he'd done. He lunged forward, a black streak of motion, roaring out a challenge. He announced his identity with pride, the formidable inherent fiend of the viridescent nethercult. But his big attack was just a slap. He quickly apologized, claiming there was a mosquito bothering the elder. The fiend was clearly terrified. The fiend put on a show of being helpful, but the system told Hanjue the real story. Chen Santian's hatred had grown to 4 stars. Hanjue didn't get it. For an entire year, he hadn't done a single thing to the guy. To keep an eye on him, Hanjue hadn't even dared to leave the cave. But now, he was worried. With this much hatred, the fiend would eventually try to kill him. Chen Santian, on the other hand, was just waiting for a chance to escape, convinced Hanjue couldn't cultivate forever. The fiend was already planning his revenge. Once he escaped, he would bring his entire cult back to crush the Jade Pure sect. But his thoughts were cut short. Hanjue had decided this was over. He unleashed his attack, the 3 pure shadow swords. He looked down at the fiend. He'd given him a chance to live as a hostage, but the man's hatred made him too much of a risk. Now, things were going to get annoying. He knew how these stories worked from his past life. Killing someone always meant their powerful masters would come looking for revenge. It was a classic chain reaction. You kill the student, the master shows up. You kill the master, and his even older master appears. It just never ends. And just like that, a powerful presence filled the cave. An old one was really here. The newcomer was furious, promising death for what Hanjue had done to his disciple. He demanded to know his name. Hanjue calmly gave a fake one, Cao Cao, and then asked for the man's name right back. The spirit introduced himself as Zhang Kunmo from the Undulant Nebula cult. He swore he'd remember the name Cao Cao and that death was coming for him. Then he vanished. A second later, the system confirmed it. Zhang Kunmo's hatred was at 5 stars. Hanjue couldn't believe it. That was the highest it could possibly go. This was a serious problem. The man was at the 8th level of the nascent soul realm, way too strong for him to handle right now. He decided he needed to contact the sect and have them deal with this. 8 years passed. One day, a woman appeared at the entrance to his cave, calling out for her husband. Hanjue was completely stunned. It was Lady Xing. He couldn't understand how people kept getting past his array formation. He asked her why she was here, and she simply said she came to see him. She then presented him with a huge amount of pure jade pills. She explained that she'd saved them up for years and wanted him to use them for his cultivation. But Hanjue told her to take them back. He said he didn't need them anymore. He pointed out that she was only at the 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment realm and should use the pills for herself. Her eyes widened as she started to put it together. Hanjue calmly warned her not to tell anyone about his breakthrough. Then, he told her that if she truly wanted to be his Tao companion, there were conditions. He laid out the hard truth for her. If she didn't work harder, in a few hundred years, he would be an immortal, and she would be nothing but bones. Her love would just become a painful memory for him. Lady Xing looked down, quietly agreeing that she couldn't hold him back, but she completely missed the point. She told him to cultivate in peace, promising she would find him golden core pills. Hanjue immediately started to panic. That wasn't what he meant at all. Meanwhile, in a dark, hidden place, the viridescent nether cult was meeting. The leader of the cult, Duan Tongtian, was furious. He demanded to know why they still hadn't captured Li Qingzi after all this time. One of his followers, a man covered in bandages, spoke up. He figured Li Qingzi was just a distraction and suggested they attack the Jade Pure sect directly. But another member warned them to be careful. He reminded them that besides Li Qingzi, there was another powerful old monster in the sect. Still, others were eager to fight, volunteering to lead the attack themselves. They all turned to their leader, waiting for his decision. Duan Tongtian told them to wait. He explained that he wasn't backing down, but this time would be different. He revealed his big plan. He was about to break through into the Soul Formation realm. If he succeeded, the fight would be an easy win. His followers were stunned. The Soul Formation realm was a huge deal. One of them asked how confident he was. Duan Tongtian declared that he'd been preparing for decades and was 90% sure he'd succeed. All they had to do was wait another 20 years. The news sent a jolt of energy through the cult. 20 years was nothing to them. They erupted in cheers, already tasting victory and promising to destroy the Jade Pure sect for good. The bandaged man stared into the darkness, a glint in his eye. The Jade Pure sect's days were numbered. Another 10 years flew by. Hanjue could feel himself getting stronger every single day. The nascent soul realm was finally within reach. He was celebrating his progress when a voice suddenly called out to him. It was his senior sister. He was shocked and asked how she got past his formation. She just smiled, reminding him that she was the one who set it up in the first place. She told him she'd brought some treasures to plant in his cave's pool. She said they would boost the spiritual energy, maybe even making it the best in the entire sect. Hanjue was incredibly grateful and bowed to thank her. She told him not to thank her, explaining that the treasures were actually a gift from their master. She then mentioned that since he'd been in seclusion, their peak had taken on several new disciples. But then her tone changed. She told him that Brother Iron, one of the disciples under him, had died. The news hit Hanjue hard. He couldn't believe it. She explained that Brother Iron's potential was just too low. His lifespan simply ran out. But she added something strange. Before he died, he had wanted to meet with Hanjue. Hanjue didn't understand. He barely even knew the guy. And then a memory came back to him. He remembered a young boy, only 6 years old, whose parents had fled and abandoned him. Someone had asked if they should search for his parents, but their master was cold. He just ordered the boy to take over his parents' work in the fields. Even when someone pointed out he was just a child, the master didn't care. The master's logic was cold. He said letting the boy work was better than letting him starve in the wild. Looking back, Hanjue realized that while the master was often mean, he had never actually hurt him. In a way, the man had raised him. He admitted to himself that he used to hate the man, but without him, he probably wouldn't even be alive. He figured this was just the path of cultivation. Everything happens for a reason, and some people just leave too soon. The thought of loss made him turn to his senior sister. He told her she had to cultivate harder, because if she was gone too, he'd truly be lost. She smiled, teasing him for being silly, and thinking she didn't know he cared. With the spiritual grass planted, she said it was time to get back to her own cultivation, promising to stay with him on his journey. After she left, Hanjue stood for a moment. He had made a simple memorial for Brother Iron. He looked at the simple grave marker and made a quiet wish, hoping that Brother Iron would be born into a good family in his next life. Time passed quietly in the cave. Another decade went by. Hanju's power grew, pushing him to the 9th level of the Golden Core realm. As his 100th birthday approached, the system unlocked a new function. It was called the simulation trial. It let him fight a perfect copy of anyone he knew, or anyone within 100 miles, without any real danger to either of them, and he could do it as many times as he wanted. Hanjue couldn't believe it. A way to fight with zero side effects? This was the ultimate cheat skill. He had never actually known how strong he was. Now he could finally find out. He pressed yes without hesitation. A bright light flooded his vision. A voice welcomed him to the simulation trial training ground. He found himself in a strange, empty space. It felt like a dream, like he was inside his own consciousness. The system told him he could pick an opponent from anyone he knew. He thought fighting his friends felt weird, so he decided to just pick the strongest person on the list. He chose Li Qingzi, the sect master, who was at the 8th level of the nascent soul realm. A perfect copy of the man appeared right in front of him. Hanjue was shocked. It looked exactly like the real thing. The fight started instantly. The copy of the sect master was unbelievably fast, and Hanjue barely had time to react. The simulation didn't wait for a signal. It just attacked, using the 7 illusionary steps to close the distance in a flash. Hanjue realized this wasn't a friendly spar. The copy was fighting with its full strength, so he had to do the same. He didn't hold back. He unleashed one of his strongest skills, the 3 pure shadow sword technique. The attack landed with incredible force, creating a huge explosion that filled the entire space. But when the smoke cleared, Hanjue was stunned. His powerful sword technique had done nothing. The sect master's copy had a golden body that was completely unharmed. Hanju grit his teeth. If that didn't work, he'd just have to try something even stronger. He unleashed the 9 Dragons' devil expelling seal, sending a blast of pure energy right at his target. The blast was massive, sending Hanjue flying backward through the air. The simulated space was filled with clashing energy as the fight raged on. He had to admit, the 9 Dragons' devil expelling seal was powerful, but it wasn't enough. He could only defend himself. He couldn't actually defeat an opponent at the 8th level of the nascent soul realm. Just then, the system popped up with a question. It asked if he wanted to lower the opponent's strength. Hanjue's eyes narrowed. This simulation was getting more and more interesting. Meanwhile, in the main hall of the Jade Pure Sect, one of the elders was completely stunned. He demanded to know if the news he just heard was true. It was absolutely true. Duantong had broken through to the soul formation realm. The elders panicked, wondering how they could possibly fight him. Someone asked about their own master, but was told he was still far from reaching that level of power. Feeling cornered, the elder suggested that their only option was to ask for help. But the green-haired man had already sent letters to the other sects, and no one had replied. He lamented that if only the great ancestor was there, they'd stand a chance. But he had been gone for years, leaving them to face this threat alone. The great grand elder finally made a decision. He announced that he and one other would handle Duan Tongtian personally. The others immediately protested, but he shut them down. With their current strength, anyone else who went would be useless. But one of the elders spoke up. He reminded them that his heavenly constellation golden body, the sect's strongest technique, had never been broken. He was confident that it might be enough to match their enemy. Funny enough, at that exact moment, Hanjue was busy smashing that very same technique to pieces in his simulation. The system notified him of his success. He had just defeated an opponent 5 levels higher than himself. While the sect elders were planning for a desperate battle, Hanjue was just having a good time. This new simulation feature was a blast. 10 years passed in a flash, and in that time, Hanjue had been busy. He had been cultivating non-stop, pushing his limits. After 10 years of hard work, all 6 of his cultivation potentials had reached the absolute peak of the golden core realm. He was ready for the next step, the nascent soul realm. But outside his cave, someone was watching with growing concern. His senior sister couldn't believe it. The fiendish cult was invading, and her junior brother chose this exact moment to face a heavenly tribulation. She knew if the cult members found him, they would interrupt the process. The backlash from a failed tribulation could be devastating. She clenched her fist, determined to protect him. But she also knew that with her current strength, it would be almost impossible. She decided to stand guard. Once he came out, she would immediately take him back to the inner sect, where it was safe. She let out a wondering why she ever had to fall for him. 10 days passed. The invasion began without warning, as the fiendish cult descended upon the sect. Standing guard outside the cave, the senior sister felt it immediately. A wave of fiendish energy washed over the mountain. They were here. She saw the chaos was centered on the main peak, on the complete other side of the sect. That was good. They had missed her junior brother's cave entirely. Taking him back to the inner sect now would just lead him right into the fight. She realized that as long as he stayed put, he would be perfectly safe. With that settled, she knew what she had to do. She had to go help her master, just as she had promised. As she flew away, she sent one last thought back to the cave, begging him to stay inside, no matter what. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the war, outside, Hanjue had done it. He had finally broken through to the nascent soul realm. The power felt incredible, and he could tell his 6 paths of reincarnation technique had evolved along with him. This new realm was a total game changer. It connected him directly to the energy of heaven and earth. All 6 of his separate cultivation potentials had now fused into a single, much stronger spiritual power. He no longer needed to train each of his potentials one by one. From now on, he could just absorb spiritual energy directly from the world. His cultivation was about to get a whole lot faster. The breakthrough came with a reward, a new mystical power called the Heavenly Punishment Ghost Deity Sword. But what really shocked him was his lifespan. It had jumped to nearly 1,000 years. His celebration was cut short by an urgent warning from the system. The viridescent nether cult was attacking his sect right now. He couldn't believe it. The invasion had already begun. The system then identified the enemy leader, Duan Tongtian. He was at the Soul Formation realm, a level the Jade Pure sect couldn't possibly handle. But Han Jue remembered beating a stronger opponent before. He decided to use the simulation to see if his new power was enough to stand a chance. The simulation trial began. Meanwhile, the real battle was a complete disaster. The disciples of the Jade Pure sect were being slaughtered. One of the cult's leaders, a figure wrapped in bandages, called out for someone named Cao Chao to come out and die. He laughed, mocking the entire sect as a bunch of trash. He looked up at the sky, where a massive battle was taking place. He figured his own leader would be ending it soon. He turned to his followers and gave them a simple order: burn, kill, and take everything. They roared in approval. The bandaged leader raised his hand. He announced that if they couldn't find Cao Chao, they would take all the disciples of the Jade Pure sect to avenge his own fallen student. Back in his cave, the simulation was already over. A message from the system appeared, telling him the trial took only 1 minute. Han Jue stared blankly, completely stunned by the result. But he wasn't shocked because it was difficult. He was shocked because the great enemy leader, Duan Tongtian, was so weak. He wondered if that was really all the man had. Meanwhile, at the main peak of the Jade Pure sect, the battle was raging under a storm of dark energy. The defenders were on their last legs. The pressure coming from the enemy's attack was terrifying, and they could barely stand against it. A dark figure laughed from across the battlefield, telling them to just give up already. It was Duan Tongtian. He told them if they kneeled and begged for mercy, he might consider giving them a less painful death. One of the elders stared back with pure defiance. He told Duan Tongtian that the disciples of the Jade Pure sect would rather die than submit. Duan Tongtian just sighed, bored by how slow he was. Another elder realized the fight was hopeless. He explained that the skull on Duan Tongtian's back was a treasure called the Canate Black Magnet. It could absorb and dissolve all their spiritual energy. They couldn't win. The demon would just exhaust them to death. With their energy being drained, the defenders were at their limit. The situation felt completely hopeless. As she struggled to breathe, her thoughts turned to Han Jue. She hoped he was still safe in his cave. Then, thinking of Chang Yue'er and everyone else, she felt a wave of regret. She had failed to protect them, and now she was going to die before they did. Duan Tongtian looked down at the defeated elder. He announced that a grudge lasting hundreds of years would finally be settled right now. A nasty grin spread across his face. He said it was a pity, commenting on the beauty of one of the women on the battlefield. Elsewhere, the battle was just as grim. A fiendish cultivator named Mofu Cho, with no other way out, leaped from a cliff. Her pursuers yelled for her to be stopped, but she was already falling. She had used up all her energy and couldn't even hold her sword anymore. As she fell, she accepted that this was the end. She swore she wouldn't let her enemies win, even in death. Her thoughts drifted to a certain man, and she wished she had been as dedicated to her cultivation as he was. She closed her eyes, wondering if they might meet again in the next life. Suddenly, she was caught. She opened her eyes to see Han Jue holding her, and she whispered his name in disbelief. He held her securely as they descended through the air. She was completely speechless, unable to understand how he was even there. Mofu Chu was so dazed, she wondered if she was already dead and in heaven. That's when a notification appeared for Han Jue. Mofu Cho's favorability had jumped to 5.5 stars. Just then, a voice called out from below. Someone else had found them. It was Mo Ju. He stared up at Han Jue, his face a mask of disbelief. He couldn't understand how any of this was happening. Without wasting a second, Han Jue tossed Mofu Cho to her brother. He told Mo Ju to take care of her and announced he was heading to the main peak. Mo Ju was completely stunned, trying to process what just happened. He couldn't understand how Han Jue cultivated. The 3 experts who had been chasing him were all at the Golden Core realm, and Han Jue had just wiped them out in an instant. Meanwhile, Han Jue raced toward the main peak. He could feel the aura of a soul formation cultivator and knew the situation was bad. That's when he spotted a group of his sect members on the Jade Serene Peak, completely surrounded by fiendish cultivators. Down on the peak, the disciples were preparing for a final stand. One of them, senior brother Meng, urged his junior sister to escape with the new disciples while they held off the enemy. He and the others had already accepted their fate. They were ready to die, but they planned on taking their enemies with them. Suddenly, 3 bright rays of light shot through the battlefield. The junior sister's eyes widened. She seemed to recognize that attack. A massive sword made of pure energy sliced through the air. The impact was instant and devastating. The enemies were torn apart before they could even react. The fiendish cultivators were completely wiped out in a single, blinding flash. The disciples stared, stunned. All of their enemies had been cut to pieces. The junior sister whispered his name, realizing Han Jue had just saved them all. Meanwhile, On the main peak, a tense standoff was happening. A voice from the shadows offered a single chance. The bandaged leader told the woman to marry him and return to the viridescent nether cult, promising to spare her life. But she refused, saying she would rather die because their leader, Duan Tongtian, was the one who killed her parent. He told her they'd do it the hard way, warning that his body was covered in deadly poison. But instead of being afraid, her entire attitude changed. She looked at him with hearts in her eyes and called him darling, agreeing instantly. The man was completely caught off guard. He smirked, thinking to himself that a little force was all it took to make people behave. But as he was celebrating, a dark presence appeared right behind him. The bandaged man dropped to the ground, completely finished. Xing Hongshuan stared in disbelief. She knew who he was, the second strongest core disciple of the cult, and Han Jue had taken him out in a single move. Another woman, Lady Sin, appeared and warned Han Jue that it wasn't safe. She urged him to find a place to hide. Xing Hongshuan agreed, telling him to be careful. As he left, a notification popped up. The system confirmed that Xing Hongshuan's favorability towards him had jumped to 6 stars. Han Jue couldn't help but be impressed with his own charm and power. Miles away, the true leader of the fiendish cult was making his move. He mocked the Jade Pure sect, complaining that his people had been hunted for 100 years for killing a few useless parasites. But now, he declared, things were different. Facing him was one of the sect's leaders, Fairy C. Xuan. She was injured and could only stand there in silence, defeated. The cult leader looked down on the fallen disciples of the Jade Pure sect. He announced his plan to use every last one of them as training fodder for his own followers. He laughed, boasting that his fiendish cult would soon become the #1 power in the entire empire. Everything the Jade Pure sect had built for 100 years was on the line. The members could only watch in horror, wondering if this was the day their sect would finally fall. The cult leader struck, and Fairy Sichuan was sent flying back. The cult leader loomed over Fairy Sichuan, mocking her. He asked if she was finally ready to surrender, and wondered how many of her people were even left alive. But she wasn't broken. With a look of pure defiance, she told him to go to hell. Furious, the leader unleashed a final, devastating attack to end her. One of the sect elders could only watch in horror, screaming out for his junior sister as the blast came down. But before the attack could land, a figure moved like lightning, using a skill called the 7 illusionary steps to appear out of nowhere. It was Han Jue. He had caught his master, saving her at the very last second. He gently asked if she was okay. Fairy Shi Xuan stared up at him, her eyes wide with shock. She couldn't believe it was him. The other elders were just as stunned. One of them admitted he was a good disciple, but then yelled at him to leave, believing they were all about to die anyway. Han Jue tried to speak, but his master cut him off. She told him to run, even kicking him out of the Jade Pure sect to free him from his duty. As she prepared to hold the enemy back, the cult leader just laughed, mocking Han Jue for being such a low-level cultivator. The cult leader laughed, telling Han Jue to kneel and beg if he wanted to live. At that same moment, the system gave him a choice: run for his life and get a reward, or kill the leader and save the sect for an even better one. For a guy who always chose to run, this was a huge decision. But this time, something was different. Han Jue looked him dead in the eye and said he wasn't there to join. He was there to kill him. The cult leader was shocked for a second, then started laughing. He was impressed by the kid's nerve. But before the leader could act, another enemy appeared right behind Han Jue. It was an ambush. The bandaged man sneered, ready to finish him off. One of the Jade Pure sect elders recognized the new threat. The cult leader just smiled, completely confident that his own elder, a man named Kun Mo, could handle this easily. He couldn't wait to watch them all fall into despair as they faced certain death. But in the next instant, something moved so fast it was just a blur. One of the cult's strongest fighters, a cultivator at the nascent soul realm, was taken down in a single hit. No one could believe what they were seeing. It was impossible. Fairy Sichuan stared at Han Jue, finally feeling the true depth of his spiritual energy. It was overwhelming. Han Jue's gaze fell on the cult leader. He calmly asked if he was ready. It was his turn now. Cult leader stood over his fallen man, completely unimpressed. He mocked Han Jue, asking if he really thought he could fight him alone, just because he got one lucky shot in. But the bandaged elder wasn't finished. He screamed in pure rage, calling Han Jue a shameless monster. He unleashed a final, desperate attack, summoning a weapon called the demonic Horizon Lamp. One of the Jade Pure sect elders yelled for Han Jue to run, warning him that the lamp could literally erase his soul. The bandaged man screamed that he would offer Han Jue's soul to avenge his disciple, but Han Jue didn't even flinch. He just prepared his own counterattack, the 3 pure shadow sword technique. And just like that, it was over. The bandaged elder was completely destroyed. Everyone from the Jade Pure sect stared in disbelief. The cult leader, on the other hand, just smiled. He found this interesting. He walked toward Han Jue, admitting that anyone who could kill one of his elders was more than strong enough to join his cult. He offered Han Jue a position as an elder, promising him unlimited resources. But as he asked for an answer, a blade was already at his throat. But the attack didn't land. The cult leader was surrounded by a shield of pure energy. Han Jue realized his sword technique had been completely blocked. The leader explained that he had a treasure that could absorb spirit energy, making him impossible to hurt unless Han Jue's own power was far greater than his. He told Han Jue that he'd been given a chance and blew it. He went on a rant about how true geniuses are rare because they don't know how to survive, and that Han Jue would be just another one to die along the way. As he spoke, he unleashed a wave of energy that shook the entire mountain. Everyone from the Jade Pure sect felt the crushing pressure. They were terrified. This was the power of a cultivator in the soul formation realm. The cult leader turned back to Hanjue, a cruel smile on his face. He promised to let him have a taste of real pain. He told Hanjue that since he came to protect the sect, he would slaughter every single member right in front of him. But Hanjue just looked bored by the whole speech. He cut the leader off, calling him noisy and asking if he was finally done talking. Then, raising his sword, he asked if the leader had any last words. The cult leader laughed, saying those last words were meant for Hanjue. But then his expression changed. Suddenly, he couldn't move his body at all. He couldn't even sense what was happening. He had no idea what kind of technique could do this. It was Hanjue's ultimate move, the heavenly punishment ghost deity sword. A blinding light exploded from his sword, filling the entire area. Fairy Sichuan watched, completely stunned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The other elders were just as horrified. Duan Tongtian was gone. A soul formation expert had just been killed by a nascent soul cultivator. One of the elders finally understood. Hanjue wasn't lucky. He was just that powerful. Meanwhile, a surviving cult member knew it wasn't over. Even though the leader's body was destroyed, his soul could still escape and eventually recover. But when they looked around, Hanjue was already gone. The sect leader felt like his sect had been blessed by the gods. He tried to remember seeing such a disciple in the inner sect tournament, but he couldn't place him at all. The soul of the cult leader, Duan Tongtian, had managed to escape. He couldn't believe it. His body had been destroyed by a mere nascent soul cultivator. It felt impossible. As the soul wondered who the monster was that defeated him, another man appeared out of nowhere. He introduced himself as Zhao Zilong from the Chang Mountains. Zhao Zilong looked down at the soul and announced that the 100-year grudge between their sects would end today. He prepared to use a technique called the six-path soul absorption. As the technique hit, the soul screamed Zhao Zilong's name. He swore that even in death, he would haunt him and that the honorable demonic sect would get revenge. And just like that, he was gone. Duan Tongtian, a powerful soul formation expert, was completely destroyed. With the threat gone, Zhao Zilong stood there for a moment, thinking about the name the soul had mentioned. Miles away, Hanjue got a system notification. He had successfully killed a soul formation cultivator and would get a great reward. But another message popped up. Someone named Xiao E now had a 5-star hatred for him. Hanjue had no idea who that was. The path of cultivation stretched far beyond what Hanjue had ever faced. There was soul formation, then void amalgamation, all the way up to tribulation transcendence, where a cultivator could finally become a god. The final realm was Mahayana, true immortality. But Hanjue's attention was locked on a red warning screen. The system told him a new enemy, Xiao E, was at the second level of the void amalgamation realm. Turns out, Duan Tongtian was just his puppet. Now, Xiao E wanted revenge, and his hatred was at 5 stars. Hanjue's heart sank. A much bigger problem had just arrived. He knew he stood no chance. Even if he broke through to the soul formation realm right now, it wouldn't be enough. Just then, someone from the Jade Pure sect shouted, pointing towards a strange disturbance in the sky. A ghostly skull appeared in the sky, laughing. It called Duan Tongtian a useless piece of trash who only managed to buy a little time. The spirit then took on a more solid, fearsome form and announced it was time to find a new host. Zhao Zilong appeared and launched an attack, but the red spirit, Xiao E, just laughed it off. He explained that such attacks were useless against a void amalgamation expert. He introduced himself as an elder of the demon taming sect, admitting this plan had been in the works for years. He told Zhao Zilong he would remember him. Zhao Zilong's eyes narrowed. He asked if that meant Duan Tongtian was just a pawn used to buy time. Xiao E scoffed and said, of course. He called Duan Tongtian a piece of garbage who lied about his own strength. But then he paused, suddenly suspicious, and asked if the warrior was trying to get information out of him. The warrior noticed something was off about Xiao Ei's soul. He asked if his physical body had been damaged, or maybe even completely destroyed. Xiao Ei shot back that he wasn't qualified to know, and that he was lucky he didn't like to bully juniors. Before disappearing, Xiao Ei gave them one last warning. He announced that he'd already reported back to the demon taming sect, and that their days were numbered. The elders finally understood. The demon taming sect was behind everything. The green-haired elder declared the viridescent nether cult finished, but said they had to eliminate every last member. He turned to Hanjue, about to ask for his help, but Hanjue wasn't listening. He was focused on his master, apologizing for what happened and saying he would heal her immediately. The elder tried to tell him that her injuries weren't that serious. Hanjue refused, saying his master was more important and they should go without him. He knew that becoming famous would only lead to more enemies. His master smiled, clearly proud. The other elders started complaining, one wishing he had such a loyal disciple, while another grumbled about his own, who had stolen from him. One of the elders stepped forward, demanding to know where Hanjue was really from. He insisted that there was no way the Jade Pure sect could have trained a cultivator with his level of power. Hanjue simply told him to let the past go. He said all that mattered was that he was a disciple of the Jade Pure sect now, and he had no intention of harming it. Another elder jumped in. calling the question rude and warning that they couldn't afford to drive Hanjue away. As they argued, the few remaining cult members looked on in horror. They couldn't sense their sect master anywhere, and the reality of their defeat began to sink in. The green-haired elder made a desperate offer. He yelled that if Hanjue killed the remaining enemies, he would make him the next sect master. But Hanjue didn't even acknowledge him. He just calmly told his senior brother not to strain his newly healed arm, repeating that they would talk after his master was healed. The elder was left completely speechless. An elder's voice boomed across the battlefield, announcing the death of the viridescent Nether cult's master. He declared that the Jade Pure sect had crushed them completely. The news hit the remaining cult members like a tidal wave. They panicked, realizing it was time to run for their lives. With the enemy's will broken, the Jade Pure sect disciples charged forward. The battle turned into a complete rout as the cult members desperately tried to escape. The elders watched the chaos unfold. One of them commented that it was better this way. Letting them run saved lives. After this, he was sure the viridescent Nether cult would never dare to bother them again. The green-haired elder turned to the others. He said they had all seen Hanju's true power and that he should be made the vice sect master. He explained that his own time was ending, and with Hanju's talent, he was the perfect person to help lead the sect. He was determined not to let him get away. Hanjue's answer was simple: no thanks. The elder was completely stunned, unable to understand why anyone would turn down such an offer. Hanjue explained that he just wanted to cultivate in peace. Being a leader would take up all his time. Hearing this, the white-haired elder proposed a solution. They would make Hanjue an elder, give him all the benefits of the vice sect master, but no one would be allowed to bother him unless the sect was in serious trouble. That deal worked for him. With the new arrangement settled, Hanjue's thoughts turned back to the powerful old man who had appeared earlier, wondering what had happened to him. The elder reassured him, explaining that only the man's soul was left. He figured out the enemy's plan. Duan Tongtian was just buying time so someone else could use a secret technique to absorb the sect's spiritual energy. Their entire attack had been a distraction. The elder tried to calm him down, saying the North State was on the other side of the world and their allies would stop any attack. But Hanjue wasn't convinced. He knew anything could happen. The only real solution was to get back to his cave and cultivate until he was strong enough to face any threat. As the Jade Pure sect began to rebuild, a rumor started to spread. People were talking about a mysterious hero they called the deity-slaying elder, who had saved them all with a single, decisive strike. The rumor caught on like wildfire. Soon, everyone was talking about the deity-slaying elder. He became an instant idol, and a fan club was already forming. But his master wasn't celebrating. She dismissed the other disciples, telling only Hanjue to stay behind. She got straight to the point, demanding to know who he really was and why he had joined the Jade Pure sect. She explained that while the sect master might look the other way, she, as his master, couldn't. It finally made sense why he never needed her guidance. Hanjue tried to play it cool, reminding her that she already knew his background and asking if she didn't trust his talent. She wasn't buying it. Talent was one thing, but she demanded to know where his incredible techniques came from. He knew she had a point. A nascent soul cultivator killing a soul formation expert was completely unbelievable. Anyone would be suspicious. So he decided to tell her a story. After making her promise to keep it a secret, he began a completely ridiculous tale about an innocent child who found a magic ring under a tree. He spun a tale about a child who found a magical ring. Instead of keeping it, the boy tried to return it, only to find an immortal living inside. The immortal saw potential in the child and decided to give him a chance. The immortal in his story saw the boy as an once-in-a-million talent and taught him through dreams. But he also warned that the path ahead would be dangerous, so the boy had to cultivate in secret. Even as he told the lie, Hanjue was sure his master wouldn't fall for it. But to his complete surprise, she actually believed him. She said that stories like that weren't unheard of. She then asked why he bothered to save them, since the sect had abandoned him before. He admitted that was true, but after 100 years, the only people left in his life were here, and the most important person to him chose to stay and die with the sect. The system chimed in, showing that his master's feelings towards him had grown stronger. She then asked what he planned to do next. Just go back into seclusion like always? He told her that's exactly what he was going to do. He was worried about the next monster that might attack, and knew he had to get stronger. With that, she dismissed him. He remembered how the other disciples used to talk about him. Before the battle, they called him a coward. Now, they were calling him the demon-slaying elder and thanking him for saving them. Back in his cave, he thought about everything that had happened. It just proved he was right all along. Cultivating in secret was the only smart move. If he'd been even a little bit weaker, he wouldn't have survived. He had to keep getting stronger. A familiar voice called out to him. It was his senior sister. She was carrying a basket of natural treasures from the sect. She explained they would boost the spiritual energy in his cave, and she was here to help him plant them and set up a new formation. She told him to stop being so formal. Now that he was the famous demon-slaying elder, she felt she couldn't call herself his senior sister anymore. The system even popped up, showing her excitement over his new title. He leaned in close and told her that as long as she never slacked off, she would always be his senior sister. She got flustered, admitting that she could never hope to compare to his talent. He told her he had a request. Eager to help, she promised to do anything he asked. A sly grin spread across his face. He'd been waiting for this. His big request? He wanted her to add another array formation to his cave. One one that would protect it from fire and thieves. 3 years passed. After preparing their forces, the Jade Pure sect finally went on the offensive. They marched on the viridescent Nether cult. Without its leaders, the cult stood no chance and was quickly crushed. And just like that, the viridescent Nether cult, a power that had existed for hundreds of years, was wiped out. The news sent shockwaves through the entire cultivation world. With the cult gone, the Jade Pure sect's reputation grew. The name demon-slaying elder became a legend, but his true identity remained a complete secret. Back in his cave, Hanjue felt a surge of power. He had broken through to the second level of the nascent soul realm. Then, the system popped up with a message. He'd unlocked a hidden achievement for the cult's destruction, triggering extra rewards. The system gave him special pills, a treasure called the Demon Binding Rope, and a powerful new skill manual. He was ecstatic. Suddenly, a massive storm appeared out of nowhere, with lightning crashing down right over the sect. The elders immediately went on high alert, thinking another cult was attacking. They prepared for battle, but they were confused. The viridescent Nether cult was already gone. One of the masters used his Chi Vision spell to see what was really going on. He quickly told everyone to calm down. The rumbling was just coming from Hanjue's territory. Turns out, Hanjue was just testing out his powerful new skill, Major Chiliocosm Thunderstorm. It was a thunder-type spell that could cause massive destruction over a huge area. He was thrilled. He finally had a powerful attack that could hit multiple enemies at once. A little while later, Sect Master Li found Hanjue outside. He said he had something he wanted to discuss with him. The Sect Master told Elder Han that the sect would give him anything he wanted as a reward, but Hanjue insisted he didn't need anything fancy. All he wanted was to live in peace. Li then pointed out that his current cave was a bit small. Hanjue turned down the offer to move to the main peak, saying he was used to his small cave. The sect master made an even better offer. They would use the sect's best resources to build a brand new, custom cave just for him. Hanjue was stunned. Sect Master Li had one more thing to discuss. He asked Hanjue if he'd be willing to take on a disciple. He explained that the kid had a lot of potential and could be a big help to him in the future. The system immediately gave Hanjue a full report. The young man's name was Yang Tiandong. He was a half-demon, half-human, with the bloodline of a demon saint. His potential was unmatched, but he'd been imprisoned by the cult after losing control of his powers. Hanjue couldn't help but think this guy sounded like a protagonist from a story. The young man, Yang Tiandong, respectfully greeted Hanjue. Hanjue agreed to take him as a disciple on one condition. He would only teach him spells and magical powers, not the sect's core techniques. The sect master was happy to hear it. Sect Master Li said that was fine. The boy could earn the techniques through his own efforts. He then handed Hanjue a box full of tokens carved with his new title. He explained they were for Hanjue to give to any future disciples he might take on. Hanjue was confused. He didn't plan on taking any more. With that settled, the sect master decided to leave the new master and disciple alone to talk. For a moment, neither of them said a word. Hanjue broke the silence. He told the boy he already knew his name was Yang Tiandong and had figured out his origin. He then laid it all out, that he was half demon and that he'd been held captive by the cult. Yang Tiandong was completely stunned. He had no idea how Hanjue could know all that. He remembered an elder's warning to keep his identity a secret. He couldn't believe Hanjue had figured it all out on his own. Hanjue made it official. From that day on, Yang Tiandong was his disciple. Yang Tiandong was completely in awe of his new master's abilities. The system showed his favorability had gone up. Of course, Hanjue knew he hadn't figured out anything. The system had just told him everything. Hanjue gave him a token and told him to find a place to cultivate. Just as he was about to leave, Yang Tiandong spoke up, saying he had a request. He explained that his father had left him an ultimate technique. The problem was, he had to reach the soul formation realm before he could even start to learn it. He admitted he wasn't the brightest and hoped Hanjue could guide him. He held out a small red feather. The moment Hanjue saw it, he felt a jolt. He was completely stunned. Hanjuke tried to use his divine sense to inspect the feather, but something was blocking him. It was completely sealed off. He realized it would take the divine sense of a soul formation cultivator to see what was inside. He accepted the feather, promising to study it. Then he gave Yang Tiandong his first assignment, cultivate his spirit energy for 10 years straight. Only after that would he teach him any spells. Yang Tiandong was stunned. 10 years? When Hanjue asked what was wrong, the disciple quickly said it was nothing and went off to start his training. 10 years passed in a flash. Hanjue had reached the 4th level of the nascent soul realm. He was getting close to his goal, and it made him wonder how his disciple had fared over the last decade. Yang Tiandong was relieved. His master had finally woken up after sitting perfectly still for 10 years. Hanjue checked his disciple's progress and was genuinely impressed. The kid had gone from the 1st to the 6th level of the foundation establishment realm. He definitely had a knack for this. Hanjue asked his disciple how he felt after a decade of training. Yang Tiandong proudly announced that he'd learned a lot and even grasped some deep principles of cultivation. Hanjue was furious. He'd been in seclusion for ages and never grasped a single thing. With that, Hanjue decided it was time for his disciple to get some real-world experience. He sent him to the sect's mission building with a simple order: don't come back until he was number 1 on the monthly contribution list. Yang Tiandong couldn't believe it. That was an insane task. Hanjue was relieved to finally have some peace and quiet. Turns out, he had a plan all along. For the last 10 years, he'd been preparing to unlock the feather's secret. He took out a bottle of divine cognition pills. These would boost his divine sense to the soul formation realm, more than enough to see what Yang Tiandong's father had hidden. It was all going according to his plan. The pills worked perfectly, increasing his divine sense tenfold. Han Jue focused this new power on the crimson feather. A powerful barrier pushed back, but after just a few seconds, he broke right through it. The moment the seal broke, a massive amount of information flooded his mind. It was a mystical power called imitation of heaven and earth. Miles away, a group of young hopefuls looked up at the towering mountains of the Jade Pure Sect. The new kids were a mix of nervous and excited, wondering if they'd even be accepted. Their guide, a man named Senior Mo, just smiled. He remembered what it was like to be young. He thought back to when he first arrived, just like them. Now, he was the one responsible for enrolling new disciples. He figured it would be an easy day, but in the shadows, someone was watching them. A small needle shot out from the trees, striking Senior Mo before he could react. The needle exploded in a cloud of poisonous fog. Senior Mo yelled for the kids to get back, shouting that they were under attack. The man who threw the needle leaped out from the trees, his dual blades ready to finish the job. But Senior Mo wasn't going down that easily. He blasted the assassin with a powerful bolt of purple lightning. The lightning hit hard, and the attacker grunted in pain as the energy coursed through him. The whole area exploded with purple light as Senior Mo pushed his power forward. The blast was too much. It sent the attacker flying, shattering the ground on impact. For a second, it looked like he'd won, but then he felt a sharp pain. He realized he'd made a huge mistake. He wasn't alone. A second attacker had snuck up from behind while he was distracted. The kids could only watch in horror, screaming his name. The man in the straw hat landed and gave his orders. He told everyone to kneel, making it clear they were only there for Mo Fucho. Senior Mo collapsed. He couldn't move a muscle. The attack had hit a vital point and paralyzed him. The leader of the attackers introduced his group as the Phantoms in Raincoats. He then gave a grim warning. A great disaster was coming for their sect. But before he could do anything else, something huge and fast slammed right into him. The disciples below could only look up in complete shock. A massive, shadowy figure now stood over them all. The system explained the technique being used, a mystical power called imitation of heaven and earth, which allowed a cultivator to grow 1,000 meters tall. The giant's eye glowed with red light. He was furious, calling the attackers trash for daring to capture one of his sect's disciples right on their doorstep. The giant's foot was so big it blocked out the sky. The attackers stared up in disbelief, wondering if the massive figure was even real. Han Jue felt the power coursing through him. This ability was incredible, not just for its destructive force, but for the fear it created. But he had a problem. He couldn't just crush them without hurting his own people. As he looked down, he recognized the paralyzed disciple. The young disciple screamed in terror. The leader of the attackers shouted for his men to retreat and grab the kids as hostages. He figured the giant wouldn't dare to act recklessly then, but the giant didn't hesitate. A massive hand came crashing down. The attacker was shocked. He couldn't believe a member of the Jade Pure Sect would risk hurting his own people. Mo Fuchu screamed for him to stop. He begged him not to involve the kids, insisting they were innocent. The massive hand swept past Mo Fuchu, seemingly missing him completely. For a moment, he thought he was safe. Then he realized it was a trick. The real attack struck him before he could even process what happened. When the dust settled, the attackers were gone. Mo Fuchu looked around, completely confused. The young disciples realized what had happened. Someone had saved them, but they were too fast to even see. But Mo Fuchu knew there was only one person powerful enough to instantly defeat two Golden Core experts. He snapped at one of the disciples to stop daydreaming and come heal him. Back in the sect, one of the elders was enjoying a quiet moment with his favorite magazine. His peace was shattered when someone burst through the door, calling for the sect master. It was Han Jue. He dropped the two attackers on the floor and explained they had tried to kill Yemokucho. The elder's eyes widened. He recognized them as the Phantoms in Raincoats, a pair of swordsmen who had slaughtered many righteous cultivators. The sect master confirmed the elder's suspicion. These men were from the Raincoat sect, a group that tried to conquer the entire cultivation world 1,000 years ago. He explained that after being crushed by a union of righteous sects, they had vanished, but now they were back, capturing talented disciples. Another elder realized this meant they probably had a spy inside their own walls. The sect master agreed it was a possibility, but warned them not to make any rash decisions. The younger disciple asked how strong the Raincoat sect was. The sect master admitted they definitely had soul formation cultivators, but he wasn't sure if they had anyone stronger. Hearing this, the disciple had only one thought. Maybe he should just run. The great grand elder announced he was leaving to unite the other sects. He put the entire safety of the Jade Pure sect in Han Jue's hands. The system immediately gave Han Jue a choice: leave and get a cosmetic pill, or stay and get a powerful manual and cultivation pills. Han Jue agreed without hesitation. The elders were relieved, confident the sect was in good hands. For Han Jue, it was simple. As long as he didn't have to go outside, he'd do anything. 6 years passed in an instant. Han Jue stretched, having just broken through to the 5th level of the nascent soul realm. His lifespan had now officially passed 1,000 years. He started to wonder why the sect master hadn't returned yet. He checked his system notifications and his heart sank. His friends had been attacked dozens of times by the Raincoat sect, and his own disciple, Yang Tiandong, had been captured. But he immediately shut that thought down. He saw it for what it was: a trap. Some mysterious force was trying to push him into danger, and he refused to fall for it. sect. Miles away, his disciples sat captured and alone. Manhwa sent a silent apology, telling him he was powerless to help and wishing him better luck in his next life. He decided he wasn't going to leave the mountain, but he knew he still had to do something for the sect. He had to repay the kindness they'd shown him. He remembered the other elders' words, the suspicion that there was a hidden spy among them. Manhwa looked at his communication jade, wondering if it was true. Was there really a traitor from the Raincoat sect inside their walls? So, he checked. The system pulled up a profile for old immortal Taoist Thunder, the teaching elder of Heavenly Thunder Peak. But the last line confirmed his worst fears. The elder wasn't just part of their sect. He was a secret deacon for the Raincoat sect. Manhwa was stunned. The traitor had been right there the whole time. It all made sense now. Old immortal Taoist Thunder was the only elder who never warmed up to him, even after he'd saved the sect. Manhwa had just thought he was cold, but the man was a spy. With the sect master and great-grand elder gone, he had to figure out what to do. There was only one person he knew he could trust with this. He contacted his master immediately. He explained that he'd found an elder working for the Raincoat sect and needed to know what to do. She simply asked him for a name. He told her it was old immortal Taoist Thunder, but he had a serious problem. He didn't have any real evidence, and he couldn't possibly reveal the system. He was stuck. Her answer was not what he expected. She just told him to kill the elder. Manhwa was stunned. No questions, no requests for proof, just a direct order to execute him. She explained that she'd always felt something was wrong with him anyway. If Manhwa said it was true, then that was all the proof she needed. She told him not to report this to the other elders. They were going to handle this themselves. A moment later, they arrived at Heavenly Thunder Peak. Old immortal Taoist Thunder seemed surprised to see them. They told him they were there to give him a farewell gift. It was clear this was not going to be a friendly chat. Without another word, they unleashed the shadow sword technique. The elder didn't stand a chance. Manhwa confronted the elder, accusing him of being a spy for the Raincoat sect. He declared he was going to kill him right there to avenge all the disciples who had been kidnapped. The elder exploded with rage. A system notification popped up, showing old immortal Taoist Thunder's hatred had jumped to 2 stars. The elder unleashed a storm of lightning, preparing his counterattack. But Manhwa's attack was faster. A massive thunderstorm of energy slammed into the elder, and he didn't stand a chance. The deity-slaying elder was stunned. She couldn't even see how Manhwa had attacked. Down below, the defeated elder begged for his life, promising to do anything. Manhwa told the elder to look up. Then he turned to his master, telling her he would leave the rest to her as he prepared the 9 dragons devil-expelling seal. A moment later, the disciples of Heavenly Thunder Peak arrived. They rushed forward in a panic, asking what had happened and where their master was. The deity-slaying elder calmly explained that old immortal Taoist Thunder was a spy for the Raincoat sect, and she had just executed him. She told them to go back to their training and not to worry. The disciples were speechless. Their master was dead, and he had been a traitor the whole time. One of the elders slammed his hand down, refusing to believe it. He demanded proof, arguing that old immortal Taoist Thunder had served the sect for years. How could he possibly be a traitor? The deity slaying elder held up the evidence. They'd found a communication device, letters, and fiendish equipment in the traitor's storage ring. She explained the spies knew everything about them, right down to their most private secrets. Without her, they all would have been fooled. The other elders were shaken. They whispered about how terrifying the deity-slaying elder was, realizing he was someone they should never cross. Listening from a distance, Manhwa saw the truth. The sect wasn't just compromised. It was a total mess, filled with spies from every major power. He decided it would be too dangerous to deal with them all at once. For now, he'd just keep their names in mind and wait. Suddenly, a new notification popped up. The system had detected someone with special providence nearby. Manhwa's eyes went wide. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This discovery confirmed that his disciple's legendary bloodline was real. Things he thought were just stories. They actually existed. He didn't hesitate. He called out to the old man pushing the cart, telling him to wait. Manhwa asked the man for one of the chicks he was delivering. He introduced himself as the deity-slaying elder and told the man to just blame him if anyone asked. The old farmer was clearly intimidated. The man quickly told him to take as many as he wanted, but Manhwa only needed one. The system then confirmed what he'd suspected. This wasn't just a chick. It was a black hell chicken, the reincarnation of a demon saint from the upper world, reborn after being executed by the heavenly court. If you liked the story, subscribe for the next part. Thank you.